Hi, very good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining in to the fourth Financial E-Summit 2021. It's a pleasure on behalf of Shared Services Forum to host you all as part of this summit. Our journey started way back in 2011, and many of you would be a regular visitor to this platform and will be aware of how we have evolved over the last 10 years in terms of multiple focus area at Shared Services Forum. But today's afternoon, India time, is very, very important for us to have a reflection by many of the industry veterans, looking at how to really take that leapfrogging and look at some of the new operating models from the finance point of view or the way forward point of view. I'll just take a minute back to share about, for the people who are maybe logging in for the first time on the Shared Services Forum platform, who we are, what we have been doing for the last 10 years. So Shared Services Forum, as you know, it's a growing community. It started about 10 years back. It's a forum for practitioners, by practitioners. Every ideas and thoughts are from the practitioners. We are not an event organization. We bring the practitioners from a different space. So it be a functional focus like finance or HR or IT, or cutting across the functions from a shared services organization or from a GBS, as we call Global Business Services, or Global In-House Center organization, or GCCs, as these days we call about Global Capability Centers. So as it cuts across multiple industries, multiple functional areas, and multiple focus areas is what we bring as part of the Shared Services Forum. We look at global organizations, we look at India multinationals, very focused India organizations sharing their practices, their success stories, some of the failures as well, because we believe one thing, that learnings is a combination of success and failures, and it is important that we share some of these as part of knowledge exchange. So this is a community which is growing, and we focus multiple things as part of this community. One, of course, knowledge exchange through events like these. Now, of course, it is only limited to the virtual events. We were earlier having a combination of in-person physical events and virtual events. And I'm keeping my fingers crossed that all this speculation about wave 3 of pandemic is managed and handled well, so that we are able to find opportunities to meet in person as well. I think so far quite good in terms of looking at some of the progress virtually. I think there will be many areas where we'll be further deliberating as we go ahead, as we look at the topics to build in the times to come, in the months to come. I think the second area, besides doing these events, we also look at is very clearly the encouraging organizations to share their stories, share their knowledge through journals. So we have a quarterly journal by name Process Edge, and we use quarterly journal Process Edge for sharing this knowledge, sharing this their success stories, sharing some of the recognitions, and so on and so forth. We also have a very strong focus on research and publication, where there's a research desk at Shared Services Forum which keeps hunting for what we call just not best practices, but also next practices. How do we set the direction for the industry by bringing in some new path breaking frameworks? And we have some path breaking frameworks, and I am sure you would have been all keeping a tap of it on many of these frameworks which we have released in the past. So it'd be like called tips. So we changed it completely from what we call ITES to tips by saying it's an IT enabled services to tech integrated business services. Or we talked about PMM, process maturity model, or we talked about 7 tracks of highly effective GVS, or a people framework, or a 3 I's framework, and so on and so forth. So multiple frameworks which provides the shared services organizations either in the setup phase or in their stabilization phase or in their transformation and evolution to the next leap phase, how they can compare themselves, how they can look at a reference framework to build and grow both from the capability as well as expansion point of view. That's a third area which we focus. Besides knowledge exchange through the events, through the publications like quarterly journal called Process Edge and the research desk. The fourth one is a very interesting one, and I think there are people who keep looking forward to it, is excellence awards and recognition. So we have an excellence awards and recognition. We have a separate eminent jury panel which looks at these excellence awards, and it's a once in a year phenomena at a yearly annual conclaves. So we have recognitions for the organizations, which is the shared services units, organizations who are not even having a shared services but able to transform and provide some business impact, and also individual recognitions both for pioneering leaders as well as some achievers who are in this space and making a lot of difference to their organization. So that's the fourth area which we focus as a part of shared services forum. It's been an interesting journey, and I think I take this opportunity to thank everyone and each one of you who have been contributing in various ways, as well as supporting us, encouraging us to keep thinking of something new every time and bring something new to each one of us to share and exchange knowledge. I think I take this opportunity to thank the partners for today's event, UST and Quintus Global for really supporting it, and Muniver Technologies, Thomson Reuters, R Value Group for really enabling it. I think it's an honor to be here, and I think so all my partners, Thomson Reuters, UST, Quintus, R Value, Muniver, you all have been great support to make this happen once again. So with this, I would move on to the keynote address, because I think many of us have already received many messages by saying they're all waiting to hear from Ravi, and I think I will request him to come and share his perspective as a keynote address. I think a very interesting topic Ravi has picked up, and this is called boundaryless towards boundaryless. But just before I move on to and pass the baton to Ravi, I just also wanted to share the 2 days is going to be an interesting one. As you know, the next 2 days we'll have after this keynote address, we have a panel session which is from the lens of the CFO, starting at 3:45 to 4:45. Some industry eminent leaders there, and I'll be back there at that point of time with you all. After that, we have a GBS leaders roundtable which is supported by Thomson Reuters, and we have again some industry veterans from the GBS world to deliberate, and my colleague Anand will be the moderator for that panel. Tomorrow we have another couple of interesting sessions. We have a session which is going to be deliberating a lot about realizing value thanks to this whole leapfrogging on digital, and this is supported by UST. We will have Tanmay Agarwal from Hindustan Coca-Cola Beverages moderating this panel. We will have a next panel, which is special presentations from some interesting experiences being shared by leaders like Martin, who is joined from Basil will have Harish, will have Sushil Kedia sharing some of these interesting insights on their experiences. And we'll wrap this session tomorrow with a fireside chat from an SSF point of view, culminating some of the discussions which we'll have today and tomorrow. With this, I will request Ravi to take the session ahead from here. Can I have Ravi on the screen, please? And if you can just take the slides off from the back end, can I request them to take the slides off, please? So Ravi, I think absolutely over to you towards boundaryless finance, realities and way forward, Ravi. So over to you, Ravi. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rakesh. I think it really appreciate the initial context which you set and the power of the shared services forum, by the practitioners, for the practitioners, and I think we all have grown with this in the last 10 years of the shared services forum. I think in today's context, the thought process is really about, what the kind of keynote I wanted to look at, as Rakesh was saying. So I will try and share the slides as well. Yeah, I think so. I hope it's visible. Yeah, so I think that's great. So the context and the theme, which I thought, based on the overall, theme of the summit, which is unlocking value, through digital leapfrogging and new operating models in finance. So I had kind of introduced this thought about towards boundaryless finance. I think I will share what is the context. So I really would look at it in three parts of the keynote. One is set the context more clearly, in terms of what is boundaryless finance, how do I refer it, so that there is a clarity in terms of the context. Second one is, really looking at, the realities and way forward, making sure we share some of the specifics as of today in terms of what are the realities and some of the key elements of way forward. So it's very simple, three-part, focus, which I'm trying to bring to this conversation. So as we look at, what is boundaryless, let me just take you to the context, of, boundaryless as a concept actually has been introduced way back, actually I would say almost like, if I have to say, 3 decades back by Jack Welch, when he actually introduced that, how do we look at the new global environment in a completely different way, Actually, the way he introduces that concept is very interesting, little ironical or paradoxical. It says new boundaries of the boundaryless organizations, so it's very, very uh, contextual, powerful. I think various types of organization structures have been looked at across the globe. There are many, many features of this boundaryless organization which have been introduced in mid 90s, early 90s, mid 90s. However, I'm sure many of us know that it became, I think GE practiced quite a bit to whatever Jack Welch could do that. But as a across the global business environment corporations, I think it has not been that well exploited. Now in today's context, I'm really bringing it back to say boundaryless, but I think as we started the talk, it is about boundaryless finance. Therefore, I'm not going to look at the organization in totality because that's too conceptual in today's context. But I think what we would like to look at is how is boundaryless applies in the context of finance. So what is boundaryless? In simple terms, I would say it's beyond boundaries. It is beyond boundaries essentially. And so boundaries do exist. All of us understand that boundaries do exist. It is not that boundaries will vanish. It is very difficult to make the boundaries vanish. When I talk about finance, there are multi-functions in an organization. While there is a lot of, working together happens at the senior leadership team and business leaders and CFOs and so on. I think we have audience from across, CFOs, finance professionals, GBS leaders, and of course some of the budding finance professionals and business process leaders. So when we really talk about it, is about looking at those boundaries but going beyond the boundaries, and I will again give certain more elements to it. And it looks little bit, as I was sharing this one liner, the only way to achieve this impossible, because sometimes it looks impossible. Ravi, I think I've had many conversations with the CXOs. Beyond boundaries is, I don't know how much it's going to happen. Maybe selectively we can do it from a finance perspective or as a team perspective. It is not just to CFOs, but to multiple leaders. But I do believe that the only way to achieve the impossible is to believe it is possible to start. So I have seen this evolve in the last 4 or 5 years very carefully. And select organizations, I'll give you some of the examples which are actually, doing it extremely well, in the Indian as well as global environment. Now, beyond boundaries, so how does it really happen? I think to the connection to the overall theme of the summit, you know, leapfrogging and new operating models, it does happen first of all because there is a leapfrogging. Actually, even when Jack Welch talked about, he was talking about an organization which is, multi-types, modular organization or strategic alliances organization or network organizations or even virtual organizations. All these four types of organizations were visualized by Jack Welch and the team way back 3 decades back. And today, I think post pandemic, we have become really virtual. So it's taken 3 years for us to become truly virtual in a way. But I think having crossed this, challenging and interesting times of pandemic, I think leapfrogging is the first way to go beyond boundaries. And I'll share some of the thoughts. But to specifically say what is leapfrogging, because sometimes, from a management philosophy context, frogs leap, primarily because they want to escape from the predator or to fetch their food and so on. It's not to say it is negatively positioned. Actually, there are two leading orders who have talked about leapfrogging to pole vaulting, which is making sure that it is becomes very positive in a context. But I think the good news is in the last 2 decades, across the globe, leapfrogging has been seen pretty positive. It is actually to say, rapid changes, radical execution, and technological jump. These are the three areas which actually really happen. It is rapid changes happening across the world today, considering the pandemic is coming. Radical execution. How do we really make changes in a very swift way? And all this is happening because of due to technological jump, and that's leapfrogging. So that's the context. So beyond the boundaries, we are looking at first one as a leapfrogging. Now, so when we say beyond boundaries, what does it mean from a leapfrogging point of view? First, it's beyond RPA to combine data and digital. I think RPA has come to be accepted by many organizations today. They actually call it a smart operations. I think that's absolutely important. I don't want to, say that we have achieved everything in RPA, and we'll talk more about it as we progress. But surely, leapfrogging is not just about RPA. It's about combining data and digital. And we will talk a little bit about this context very soon. It's also about beyond tech for finance. Obviously, I think there are lot of sessions will be there between today and tomorrow talking about how do we look at technology in finance. But the world is changing. The world is completely different today. It is actually not only the CFOs and the finance professionals have to see how do I look at technology for finance. They also have to look at how do I get technology for business. Can I look at financing technology for business? Because the business models have changed. Actually, to what Rakesh was sharing, we had shared very pioneering framework, almost like 3 years back on digital metamorphosis. We actually did not even call it as digital transformation. We called it as digital metamorphosis. And we talked about three types of transformation happening simultaneously. Metamorphosis is transformations happening simultaneously. What are the three types? Business process transformation, customer experience transformation, and business model transformation. And it can be in any order. The best example of leapfrogging for us as an Indian context is Paytm, which was just a recharge company in 2012-13. Today it's become a payment bank, payment financial services company, which is like in 7 years, just imagine recharging a mobile to what it is today. So business model transformations have led that leapfrogging. And I'm sure the Paytm corporations have followed this very, very differently. Of course, a lot of new environments happened, for Paytm, surely. But the point I'm saying is it is not only technology for finance, it is making sure that as partners, not as controllers, not as checking. So, what is the return on investment? Can you show me the return on investment? Of course, it is important. But can we look at the risk behind that business if they don't take the technology? I think one of the most important thing in today's world is cost of taking a decision and cost of not taking a decision. Both are important. So how do we finance technology for business? That is leapfrogging. You know. The second one is new operating model. Beyond boundaries is really demanded by new operating model today. One is leapfrogging and new operating model. Now, what is new operating models? I want to make sure in the context of the audience today, I want to make sure I kind of share very clearly that it is not just about typical what I would say from a GBS perspective, captive, third party, and so on. That is one kind of a perspective, which we will talk a little bit element as we progress. But operating model for finance is it's a fit for purpose in this new age. Can we make sure our finance teams can actually grab business opportunities to deliver value? The focus is on grabbing business opportunities and not just focused on finance as a better function or agile finance and so on and so forth. Of course, what is the end goal is to make sure we grab business opportunities and deliver value. Now, the interesting part of it is that this is going to happen with at the simultaneous situation, leapfrogging and the new operating models. I think it's very important to emphasize this, that it's not in two isolated parts, it's happening at the same time. And if I look at what is operating models beyond finance, cross-functional interdependence. I'm sure all of us are familiar with I'm quite passionate about the kind of 7 habits which Stephen Covey talked to us, and I'm actually talking about 7 habits for the future in the way forward. Actually, he talks about 3 levels of change for leadership. Any leader, dependence to independence to interdependence. I think in the early stage, and today there are organizations in all the 3 sections. There are organizations where finance people have to depend on finance because that they control things. There are organizations which have become independent, and there are now what is required in the future is not just dependence or independence, it is interdependence. How does finance go across the organization, cross-functional? That's one of the most important things from a operating model for finance as overall function. And each of the professional, I would say this is all just to our professionals, colleagues who are there in this conversation today. The second one is beyond skill set to mindset. These are the 2 different things which will happen as we progress. So having set the context in terms of what is boundaryless, it is boundaryless as a finance, and we are looking at beyond boundaries in terms of this leapfrogging and new operating models. Now let's move on to the next area of focus. What are the realities? What are the new realities, in this context of beyond the boundaries or boundaryless finance? First one, we talked about combined data and digital. So what does it mean? The first one is finance, tech, and data partnership. It's interesting to see that we are not talking about finance and tech partnership. Data is strewn all over the organization. There are data which is financial data is not the only data. There are market data, there are predictive data, there are forecasting data, whole lot of information is available. How can we combine finance, technology, and data partnership is a new reality. It is not just about finance with data, technology with data. It is all the three working together. As I talked about, automation on RPA is even now important. It is not that it is going to be very simple, because we have seen people using our RPA or automation as band-aids. It is actually seen as a very, very end-to-end and focused area of transformation. So I still would like to emphasize, even today, the new reality exists on automation. The other big dimension is data visualization. You know, it is really making sure that, again, I'm coming to the data part, that how do you look at the data in a very different way? How do you visualize the data in the context of the future of the business? Like we talked about, again, I'm talking about some years back, this research was published by IBM, where they talked about that a finance as a function looks at hindsight, insight, and foresight, all the three sides. Now, but unfortunately, quite often we tend to spend time on the hindsight. There are many organizations that are focused on insights, but I think what is equally important in the future is how do you visualize, which is the foresight. Third one, is real-time user-friendly dynamic dashboards. I'll talk about how do we actually do this in the next immediate following slide, but I think it's not just about providing batch information. It is real-time user-friendly dynamic dashboards to the business leaders and across the business. And last but not the least, making sure that there are algorithms and demand models that enable both decision support as well as the business. Like for instance, sales forecasting algorithms exist today. There are many organizations which actually look at those algorithms today. For instance, I would say one great example or two examples, global and local, although they are competition otherwise. Hindustan Lever in India has done exceedingly well in looking at algorithms and demand models for their, driving the business. Even, of course, the environment has changed and there are a lot of things happening, but there's a huge focus. Globally, Procter and Gamble has done a significant impact in terms of using this. They actually use exponential technologies. GBS is very well integrated into the overall business stream. The GBS reports to the board in terms of what it needs to be done. These are the four ways in which you can combine data and digital. I talked about technology for business, not just for finance. And digital is the new normal. I think there's a lot of talk about this new normal today and post-COVID pandemic. I personally feel like in some respects, personally, I would say, given the wave 2 which happened, it's actually new abnormal. I think April and May was really new abnormal for us. We never have faced such a situation ever in the past. But if you have to talk about new normal, it is digital which is new normal. People talked about digital many years back, but today it is absolutely real. Therefore, what happens? There needs to be a judicious investments in technology for finance and business. I think that is the new reality. I'm using the word consciously, judicious investments. It has to be there both for finance and for business. And last but not the least is the cross-functional reach, which I talked about, which is beyond boundaries again. First one is connecting across disciplines is absolutely important. Actually, that's what actually starts blurring boundaries. When you talk about boundaries do exist, one of the things I learned when I was in Levers, as I started my career, used to say, keep your fences, but keep it low so that you can see and talk to them and make sure you partner with them, So I'm just saying connecting across disciplines is key, and the boundaries are completely blurring. Finance talent, I'll be failing in my duty if I don't talk about the talent piece today. It's a big, big question mark for us also to face in the boundaryless finance. Finance talent and GBS service delivery models are completely shifting. The classical models existed, But now new models are coming. You have freelancers, gig workers, extension of business. There are multiple models which are happening, and that is absolutely very important. And finance talent, we'll talk about finance talent very specifically as we progress in the next couple of slides. Now, talking about talent and mindsets, it's very, very important. It is scarcer than the capital. Actually, I shared this particular perspective when we were talking about escape velocity, when we had the annual conclave in February. And I picked up the same thing to continue to emphasize on the finance mindset. What does it mean? you know, I've been part of this for last 20, 25 years. We used to talk about month close calendar, compliance calendar, and a lot of calendars we all talk about in finance. I think we need to continue them, but we need to go beyond calendars to real time. Can I do things real time? That's very important. And the talent has to look at this. It's both a mindset and a talent. So I think I'm using the word right talent and mindsets because we need to make sure we nurture the existing talent. And we also need to get new people who have this kind of mindsets. Self-service, I've heard of self-service in HR. I've heard self-service in vendor portals and vendor procurement areas, but self-service in finance areas will be very, very crucial. So it's very, very important to see. And interestingly, it's a two-way adoption, which is most important. What does it mean? Can finance ensure data and dynamic dashboards on a self-service portal? Number one. Secondly, it is equally important because I've heard a lot of people saying, Ravi, we are ready to do this, but then the business is not ready. Business says, give me the MIS. I think I can create the MIS, but then there's a calendar behind this MIS. If I can use the data real time and use my own MIS, it makes a huge difference. So there is a necessity to look at calendar versus real time, self-service both ways, finance to business and business to finance. Scenario planning on tech impact. I think this is very, very crucial. I think, one of the points I talked earlier also that it is not just about investments. I think it's not just about investing or not investing. It's both. Can we have scenario planning on technology impact? I think we have scenario planning on sales. There are companies which do scenario planning on tech impact today. A lot of banking, financial services companies have done it. And a lot of companies, I think we were talking, and I'm sure in today, tomorrow conversations this will come. Many people have said technology is my business. So forget about e-commerce. Technology is my business. So scenario planning and technology. These technology companies have started looking at scenario planning, how things evolve, what happens, and the finance talent has to lead the change for business. It's leading the change. It's driving the change. It is not managing or even anticipating. It is anticipating and leading the change. This is interesting. Compliance and control are very much part of our life, whether it is from the bookkeeping days or today to the business partners. We cannot wish it away. We are the custodians in many ways. Having said that, what is most important from a new reality and talent mindset is moving from compliance to service. And actually used to say a great GBS is the one which has got service with control. And the other one is control itself. Do you control or do you ensure competitive advantage? Actually, that's how I call it as C2S, C2C, compliance to service, control to competitive advantage. MDM, I'm sure this is a very one important for all of us, both for finance, CFOs and teams, as well as GBS and people in the business process arena. But I know, and even my question is, how many masters do you manage? Not just managing masters, it is managing data. The focus is not master management, it is master data management. So master also has to be managed, data also has to be managed. We have to be very, very conscious about it. Performance management system, has to look at very different dimensions for the future. A lot of people have this as their value systems, but even it's important to look at collaborative nature of, because cross-functional, it is collaborative by design. You cannot have, I can collaborate. I will always have conflicts. I have always the challenge of, what is not working. It has to make sure it works. Tech savvy, and flexibility. I think it's very interesting to see these three combinations. And last but not the least, the talent has to contribute towards value. We talked about unlocking value. The finance talent has to focus on the value, and how does it happen? There are softer dimensions to it. Can you communicate effectively? One of the important thing I know, I think I would say 20 to 30% of finance professionals communicate very effectively. I think it's very important for each one of us to communicate effectively. I think it's very, very important for us. Beyond communication, can I influence? Can I persuade? Can I bring the business partnership in a context that I'm a partner? Not just as person I will support you, and focus on impact. So these are the elements which are very critical from a talent and mindsets point of view. We're talking about skill set to mindset. Now, what's the way forward? And as I was sharing with you, I'm really looking at 7 habits for finance professionals. I'm using the words finance professionals. It could be, I would even easily use this for GBS professionals as well. So even if there are GBS which does finance, HR, procurement, IT, customer lifecycle management, and so on, I think it's all will be applicable at the end of the day. But I would say surely for finance professionals. First one, connect with, this is a habit. So, I'm talking about you, I'm talking about me. I think we need to connect with new tech and innovators beyond my company, your company. This has to be, that's why I use the word 10 at 10, which is a very interesting formula which I follow. Sometimes it becomes 20 at 10. It is 10 minutes being spent every day at 10 o'clock in the morning to look at what can I do differently in new technology and innovators beyond my company. Can I understand what is the competition doing? Can I understand what the industry is doing? What Rakesh was talking, what are the next practices in this space? It's a habit we need to develop. In a way, it's being proactive, but then it's not just being proactive. It's actually being innovative, going outside in rather than inside out. Behave like your customer. I think this is one of the most important things. I mean, even because in the world of finance, sometimes there are internal customers. That's important. I don't want to take away the power of internal customers, but at the end of the day, the business works on external customers, end customers. I think behave like your end customer. Understand. So if necessary, go to the marketplace. I think this is something which I learned when I was a management trainee. When I joined as a finance trainee, I still had to go to the marketplace to see what the stockist would mean. What are the 40 calls in a day to be made, etc. I'm talking about way back. And today, every senior leader has to spend 1 week in the marketplace to pick it up. What happens? At the same time, you really look at how do you behave like your customer. Think speed, think mobile. I think mobile has become the order of the day today. Find a reverse mentor, because however much I can talk about, I think I need to have a reverse mentor who can actually provide me with candid inputs or support me with my learning process. Develop digital talent team in finance. I'm not talking about technology here. I'm talking about develop digital talent team in finance. It's very important. Spot them, develop them, build them, make them cross-functional. I'm sure at least I've read this book, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, in the olden days, almost about 2-3 decades back. But in the context of new realities and way forward, I would say sweat the small stuff on customer experience. One is behave like your customer, which is more like a behavior. This is actually making sure you hear in the leadership team interactions, what does customer experience mean? How are you measuring it? As I talked about digital metamorphosis, one of the 3 transformation is customer experience transformation. It is not going to be simple. It's going to be very challenging and real way to look at in the future. This up the metabolic rate. I'm sure we are now with so much of work from home and so on. I think it's important that we need to step up the metabolic rate, but not just of our physical or personal health, but also of our meetings and plans. If I need 2 hours to do some meeting, can I do it in half an hour? Can I prepare myself and finish it in half an hour? I think we need to step up our metabolic rate. If I do something in 1 month, 6 months, can I do it in 1 month? Up the metabolic rate of your meetings and plans. That's most critical, easily said, but I think it's most critical for the future. And last but not the least, which is paradoxical or oxymoron, get comfortable being uncomfortable. I think it's absolutely crucial that we get comfortable being uncomfortable. So we talked about all the three elements. We set the context of boundaryless organizations and beyond boundaries. We are not, while the Jack Welch model is very much real, but it's not been practiced. So I'm just making sure we focus on boundaryless finance. It happens through leapfrogging and new operating models. And there are areas which the finance professionals have to go beyond the existing boundaries. And some of the areas of realities and the way forward I've highlighted. To kind of conclude what I've wanted to share, I think the point of view would be boundaryless finance in the new normal. And I said new normal is digital is new normal. Future is uncertain, I'm sure. I think unpredictable. I think uncertain is an understatement. It's unpredictable. Think probabilities and prepare for it. I think this is something which I tell myself, please, every single word which I've shared with you is applicable to me as a person. And I try to practice somewhat in the last 1.5 years or 17 months, 15 months of post-COVID. I really started looking at some of these areas to a very different degree. Right people and technology and vision and culture. I'm sure a lot of people talk about vision and strategy, but given that a lot of strategies exist, people have strategies, but I think what is most critical is if you're combining people and technology, the vision and culture is what will make it happen. Last but not the least, keep the realities in focus. They are difficult. As I shared with you right at the beginning, it's impossible sometimes, but believe it is possible. And lead the change for the way forward. I think each one of you, at whatever level, I think CFOs are the best leaders who can actually set a role model. But I would say this could be applicable for a person who joins finance team today. He can or she can leapfrog, very, very quickly, And so to finish it, the best way to predict the future, if I can make an attempt to complete it with Peter Drucker, is actually to create it. So that's what I would really like to end with. And I really believe these next 2 days will be wonderful interaction. We have got lots of CFOs sharing their perspectives. We have GBS leaders, we have professionals across. And I think, Pallavi and Rakesh and the team, along with Sanjay and Anand, have packed it completely. And we also have, I think, Tanmay also on the panel at one point in time to share. I think Tanmay has been many of the practitioners have been part of this shared services forum to where it is today. And I really thank each one of them. And I really want to summarize to say, let's move towards boundaryless finance. I really was very cautious towards boundaryless finance for the future. I think now I hand it over back to Pallavi and Rakesh.
Thanks, Ravi. As always, it was great hearing your perspectives. And I think I'm sure everyone who has logged in would be delighted. You may just stop sharing your presentation.
Yeah, I will do that just now.
I think some of the points which you talked about from the 7 habits, I'm sure there's a lot to take away from here and a lot to practice it. I think is going to be very, very important. So that's great, Ravi, and thank you. And I think now we will be moving on to the next session, and
Yeah.
I'll be requesting the panelists to start coming up on the screen. So. Yeah. Can we have the panelists joining us? I can see Atul is there. Can you just put the panelists on a tile mode, please? Altaf.
Hi, Rakesh.
Just waiting for others to come in.
Hi, Rakesh.
We're just waiting for others to dial in. Just give us a moment. I think we have everyone from this panel here now. So very good afternoon and good evening. And I know somebody joining from even continental Europe and UK as well. So good morning to all of you. I think this is a pleasure to have such an eminent panel with me today. So we have Rohit Gupta, who is the CFO for Z Entertainment Enterprises Limited. Rohit, warm welcome to you for this panel.
Thank you, Rakesh.
We have Altaf Jivani. Altaf is Director and Head Group Executive Office, Wellspun Group. He has played multiple roles, moving from a typical CFO role now to the business role, if I can say. So welcome, Altaf.
Thank you.
We have Sridhar TK. Sridhar is Chief Financial Officer for ABB India. Very good afternoon, Sridhar. Can you hear me?
Hi. Hi, yes, I'm able to hear you, Rakesh. Thank you.
We have Atul Rumta, he's the CFO for NCDX, which is National Commodity and Derivatives Exchange. Good afternoon, Atul.
Hi.
Right. I'll request the backend if they can put us on a tile mode on the screen so all of us can see us together. Yeah, very nice. So I think this is an interesting one where just a while back we were talking about and we were hearing from Ravi about the boundaryless finance and how to really go beyond the boundaries and break those boundaries and so on and so forth. I think the roles of the CFO has been, under pressure, evolving and changing with every, 6 months, if I can say. Of course, the analyst says 5 years, but I will say every 6 months there has been a different demand and a pressure to the roles of the CFO. Particularly the last decade has been a very different one, no doubt about it. And there has been a different demands because of the kind of various stages, the maturity the organization is going through, etc., etc. There's a different kind of growing expectations from the business and hence the CFOs and the finance leaders. There was the whole discussion about VUCA a couple of years back is all over now. And thanks to this pandemic, it is all, the globe has become, everything became pale, if I can say. And the new world is unfolding. And I'm sure each one of you would be really playing a different kind of a role and a game, which is much different than what it was about a year and a half, 2 years back, and so on and so forth. I think that's the context in which we would like to have the next 55 minutes of conversation. My idea will be to get to hear best of the use cases, the experiential views from each one of you. So the people who have logged in can take away a lot from the experience which is shared by the eminent panel here. I must tell you, I moderated many panels, been a speaker, many panels. This is one of the panels where I'm nervous and happy. Nervous because you all are veterans from the kind of a space you come from. Being a CFOs, you play multiple compliances, technical roles and business roles. And I'm happy because I know for the next 55 minutes, I have so much to hear that I can just be shutting myself and just can go on hearing you all from your perspectives point of view. So I think to just build the conversation ahead, I will request maybe Rohit, you to share some of your perspective. I think this whole situations where there is a growing expectations as we are talking from the CFOs, and we're talking about from this session perspective how the future of this finance roles or we need to redefine the future of finance, if I can say. So if you can share as a CFO today, what kind of this growing expectations you are facing and what kind of challenges you are finding you are facing in your organization and some of your experiences in terms of how are you dealing it as a chief financial officer for your organization will be good starting point, Rohit, and then we can build it with others as well. So over to you, Rohit.
Thank you, Rakesh. Thank you for the opportunity. So firstly, I just hope that all of you are staying safe and doing well in one of these most difficult circumstances that we're facing in this modern human history. As they say, every adversity there's an opportunity to learn and improve on. And COVID-19 has accelerated the digital adoption in most organizations to a different level. So organizations were forced to work and deliver remotely, and digitalization has been the only way to make that happen. So what we are seeing is cloudification, edge, blockchain, artificial intelligence, learning. These are all becoming core pillars for most of the functions within the organization. And these new technologies are leading to transformation of both operating and functional processes. Now, see from an industry perspective, and Z Entertainment is in the media and entertainment industry. In this industry, we are witnessing 360-degree transformation. A lot of new players coming in, new form of content, new business models are evolving, and they're largely digitally led. There's deeper penetration of mobile and internet, and it's opening up huge opportunities for all media players. And again, to be harnessed through digital transformation. Just coming to the finance function, finance has been the forefront of this change, and we have been supporting both tech and operational digitalization drive. So some of these spends have been, they're difficult to justify when I wear the traditional CFO hat. They're also absolutely important, both from growth and sustenance perspective. And the role of finance has evolved, like you said, a few times in last decade, from traditional bookkeeping, financial reporting and controlling to partnering with business, enabling right investments, create the right balance between governance and empowerment to facilitate growth. So I think finance has to act as a change catalyst, and they have to lead this journey from the front. We have to adopt to newer ways of engagement and work environment, paperless virtual world, and the list can just go on. Sure. Now coming to Z, we've had our share of challenges in the last few years. We've been investing significantly in transformation and digitization of existing systems and processes. We're in the business driven by consumer insights, so it's necessary to build on those insights. And we were just hearing the panelist before that, he was talking about, behave like your customer, think like your customer. So how important it is. And we have to use those insights to, use data to drive productivity, efficiency, and excellence. So we've taken two-step approach here. So first, incrementally building on existing system and processes, creating system-driven workflows, enabling real-time reporting dashboard to aid our decision-making, and that also with data-led insights. While you can't take the intuition away from any decision, but data-led insights, help in a big manner. Secondly, we've also looked at complete overhaul of some legacy systems and processes. We are implementing new processes, which are aiding mainly for speed and agility in the business. We've implemented planning tools, which have enabled our consolidation across channels and business units, and they take no time. And so we have like 49 channels across 11 languages, and our content reaches most of the world for South Asian diaspora. So these are some of the things that we have done in Z, and I will now stop here and give it back to you, Rakesh, so that we can hear from other panelists, and then more when we get into the conversation.
Sure. Absolutely, Rohit. I think you talked about a few things which is very interesting about Z perspective, and as you rightly said, you have this 49 channels. There are regionals and national in the nature and global in the nature, and so on and so forth. And three specific points you talked about in terms of real-time insights, overhauling of some of the processes, and looking at the entire planning process, redoing it. I think it was some of the interesting ones, and even the technology and digital as the way you talked about. I would like to move towards Altaf maybe, and Altaf, if you can, we have been hearing, and this is nothing new. I think we have been talking for some time about the CFOs. In fact, we use a word called chief financial officer or chief focus officer, if I can say, right? So as a chief focus officers, they need to have a seat on the table. They are like a co-pilot, if I can say, right? And if they are a co-pilot, which means that, by design, they need to know how to fly the plane, and they can't be just like a crew, right? So they need to know how to fly the plane. Now, when you need to know how to fly the plane like a business, what it means and what kind of experiences you have for your organization in your journey, and if you can share some insights from that, will be helpful, Altaf.
Thank you, Rakesh. It's a pleasure to be here on this forum and sharing the dice with all the panel members here. So, CFO is in the ever-changing time. I would say the speed of change has now increased manifold. So, change has always been there, but it is speed which has made it more difficult. And in fact, if I have to look at CFO's role today, to bring a little different perspective here is we need to look at actually the business processes, and it is not only our processes but also the customers' processes, the vendors' processes. So the whole perspective, it is now looking at a kind of 720-degree view one must have. It is not enough to have view in your own organization, but you must also know what is your customer is looking at, how things work at their end, and how things work at the vendors' end. So I just to some of the toolkits which I keep telling about my team, and I'd like to share here, is to look at processes from 5 different lenses, and I call it as 5S. So first S is the simplicity. The second S is actually the scale. The third S is actually the synergy. The fourth S is the sustainability, and the fifth is the speed. And I'll just highlight, using one of the examples. We in Welspun India, actually, we are the largest home textile player in the world. So we make, every 5th towel sold in US is made by us, and every 10th bedsheet sold in US is made by us. So I'll pick up an example of export documentation. That's because 95% of our business comes from export. Now, if you look at the export documentation, it will be varied for every customer, and we are dealing with all these Fortune 500 companies. So each one of them will have their own requirement. So while I would have my endeavor to simplify by saying that I want to have only this 2-3 documents which will go to every customer, it's not going to work. But I will at least make an attempt to find out, can I simplify the entire requirement of the documentation? The second S is about the scale. See, earlier we would dispatch container load of goods. Now with the online, I need to actually dispatch 1 unit. So you can imagine the kind of volume which is going to go up if I have to meet that kind of requirement, of maintaining invoicing and ensuring collection and then doing the accounting part of it. So the scale, it is no longer, expected that you keep adding more resources to scale up your own operations to meet the end customer's requirement. How do I scale? How do I maintain the scale? How do I scale up using the technology? Now, nowhere in the finance, it is expected that CFO would be looking at that. But this is what is now, we need to look at, we need to drive at in the organization. The third is about the synergy. So I remember Ravi also mentioned is to look at, what is the innovation is happening outside your organization. So 10 of 10, the rule which he mentioned, it's a really wonderful thing to look at, is that today we know the kind of innovations which are happening at the fintech is practically disrupting the established organizations. And the best way is to actually tie up and synergize with those fintech organizations. So synergy does not mean only synergizing within the organization with marketing or with purchase, but also synergizing with various innovators, the technology providers, with whom we can synergize and simplify and scale up our own process without adding too much of resource. The fourth lens, which is about the speed, because everything what we are doing, we have to crash the timeline, and that's the challenge. So even that came up in Ravi's discussion, is that how do I look at the speed at which I was actually doing the business earlier. So it is not only that I have to do business with more number of customers, with managing more number of units, but also looking at the speed at which I am doing the business. So that is the fourth S. And the fifth S, which is actually got added recently, is about the sustainability, with the ESG coming in, on the radar for everybody. So for us, it was initially started because we deal with all Fortune 500 customers. So there's a huge pressure from the customer side also to know, they want to know how much less fossil fuel I've used to drive my own processes. So if I start allowing my team members to work from their own home, I can reduce the number of miles traveled by them every day. I need to keep a track of that. I need to demonstrate to them that this is the fuel I have reduced for my own team. I need to see how many papers I have reduced. So we have actually synergized with, in export documentation, the bill of lading is the negotiable document, which all the banks, everybody wants it in the original form. We are tied up with a service provider who has brought banks, the customs authorities, the importers and exporters, everybody on the same platform. So earlier we would print reams of pages, send it to our bank would send it to the customer's bank, and the customer would send it to their clearing agent. All this entire process has now been eliminated, and what would take about, say, a week's time is now happening in few seconds, and the whole process is digitized. I have reduced the number of papers. So it ticks off the sustainability box also, apart from increasing the speed and improving the simplicity of the organization. So this is just one example I used to highlight the 5S of the processes which one has to look at always.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Altaf. I think this 5S also put a lot of structure. The way you are trying to drive this whole simplification, looking at the scale, looking at the the speed and synergy and even the sustainability you talked about, the whole idea. I think also this example was very interesting. And Altaf, I'll come back to this on this in terms of the export documentation to the export as a process. So in a way, you are connecting the point that even though you are a finance leader, and the finance team was still looking at finance processes, but they were going beyond that to the core of the business, because export is a core in a way. So how you really connect it to the core of the business. I think this is very important. At the same point of time, I also wanted to shift a little bit on the same question and maybe request Atul, if you can share a perspective. When we all say there's a lot of growing expectations, and you being a very different kind of organization, in terms of being an exchange, which have a lot of regulatory and compliance requirement, and the same point of time there is sometimes, if I can use the word, a typical private company focus to grow the market share as well. So one side you are supposed to grow the market share, and one side you're looking at this whole regulatory and compliances. What kind of expectations you are dealing with, and how are you dealing with some of these expectations as a part of a CFO? It will be good to hear from you, Atul.
Sure. So I think as in terms of the role of the CFO, I don't think any other sort of senior management role in the organization has evolved as much as the CFOs has over the last 2, 3, 4 years or even longer. There was a recent sort of a survey that I read from McKinsey, which said that just 2 years back, just 4 sort of departments were rolling into the CFO, and this is just 2 years back. And recently, when they did the survey, that number had gone from 4 to 6. So that's just to sort of give you a sense that clearly, traditional CFOs who used to spend maybe 80% of their time in what we call traditional finance, whether it's audit or tax or whatever. And that number has probably reduced from 70, 80% to something like 25% or lower than that now, because that's something that, in a way is automated, it's getting taken care of by other team members. And the role of CFO is really now become much, much wider. So there's so many more functions, whether it's strategy or in many cases, HR, risk management, management of the board and the shareholders. It's just so many of those things which are now coming into play. And I've seen that in my case as well, that, we are basically a technology driven organization. We're almost like an IT company, and we spend more than 30% of our total expenses on technology. And clearly, a CFO has to partner, with practically every other member of the top management. So whether it's with the HR head in building sort of the resources for an organization like ours, which is so unique. I mean, it is a stock exchange, but it's a stock exchange in the agri space. And it's so difficult to really find people who, could add value, both or know a little about how the financial markets work, but also equally how the agri markets work. So that's something you have to do. You have to work with the chief technology officer in ensuring that investments are made in the right, in all the right technologies. So, for example, in the last 3 or 4 years, we've changed the entire front end of our trading system, so trading and surveillance. We simply went out, across the world and selected an application which was being used by London Stock Exchange and many other companies and many other stock exchanges. And, we brought that, into our sort of our business, and it's worked out very well. Clearly, the front end, the customers who use our technology are very happy. In addition, we also have seen, we are a stock exchange. So for us, we're, regulatory sort of pressure is a lot. And, the CFO has to consistently work with, the chief regulatory officer to ensure, the compliances are done properly. In addition, I think, the need for actionable MIS data visualization, etc., that's increased significantly. So CFOs no longer can afford to just look back, but they've got to look forward and make sure the business is not getting sort of in a way. I would almost say that if you're not moving forward, you're really moving back. So you've got to ensure that that doesn't happen. And then, of course, you've got to work with the CEO and the board and the CBO really on the strategy and provide strategic insights to the business. So in a way, the role of the CFO has expanded so significantly. It's also about managing shareholders, managing the board, taking capital allocation decisions, and that's become increasingly more important in the COVID world, where you have to ensure that you cut expenses or capital allocation in areas where it's not required and extend it to areas like technology, etc., where it may be required. So that's a hell of a lot of responsibility now on the shoulders of CFOs, and that's what we've seen, over time. And CFOs can no longer be just, people who and technology, tax and accounts, etc., but really play the role of bringing all the elements of the organization together and help them deliver to the best that they can.
Sure. Sure, absolutely, Atul. I think the few points which you made was very relevant from the context in which we are again talking, and I think many of these will be similar for other panelists as well. But I think few points in terms of not looking at only the past but looking the future, in terms of just not being dependent on a lag indicator but looking at a lead indicators in a way is an important. Or you talked about not limiting only to the traditional departments like tax, compliance, etc., but really looking at more strategic areas. And if I hear you correctly, you're also talking about technology from the business point of view is one area where you really work very closely with your chief technology officer, with the chief business officer and the CEOs. It's a very interesting team which works together in your context. And thinking of how we can learn from the ecosystem as well as the peers and a competition, both, if I can use the word. So, like you talked about an example of technology from a London Stock Exchange and how you really embrace it. Rather, reinventing everything was another great example of, from a finance professional's point of view, to look at some of these decisioning. I think building this discussion ahead, I would request maybe Sridhar, hearing some perspectives from you. I think there's a lot we talk about. Again from the this whole and I go back by saying this partnering, business partnering, to the as the the co-pilot I talked about, or I gave talked about chief focus officer. I think there's a lot of this whole dimension of technology has been also talked about. So I wanted to hear from you again in your context in ABB. How do you see this growing expectations from a finance, and how are you trying to deal with some of these or respond to some of these in your context, Sridhar? So over to you, Sridhar.
Thank you. Thank you, Rakesh. And I was hearing to the rest of the panelists. First of all, very insightful. And thank you very much for this opportunity. I think just to touch upon those points which other panelists are not spoken, but to share some experience from maybe B. I think what we have done within our organization is this: we have created 3 pillars. One, which is the finance business partnership roles. These are the guys who are absolutely entwined within the business, right? And so they work shoulder to shoulder with the business managers, with the rest of the teams other than the business managers as well. And then we have 2 strong pillars which support them for very fast decision making, right? So which is the shared services, which has the transactional wing and also the expert services. So I think we have 2 separate skill sets of people who are really working along with the business partners to make sure that they are equally enabled in their roles, right? So what I see actually what has happened in the recent past, I think there has been a huge transformation which has happened in the role of finance as a business partner, right? So they don't look at them as sort of bean counters as what we used to call them earlier, right? So, but now they are required to make sure that they are path makers for the business. That's something which is really expected. And what they are also know, but in this particular journey, I think the finance as a team, right, has to do a lot of reskilling, right? Reskilling the temps in the sense, leave out what they were doing in the past, where they had the zone of comfort dealing with clearly accounting topics or dealing with the auditors or dealing something which was finance topics as such, but move to do something which is non-finance, but embed finance knowledge into that so that it becomes pretty powerful, right? So how do these guys do it? How do we really do it? I think we have clearly identified that data is something pretty important within the organization. And if you look at it, so we have SAP, and to say something is that we have an SAP which serves almost more than 45 to 50 countries out of India, out of Bangalore, right? And it is run by the shared services in Bangalore, and they have one SAP, right? That means is one SAP where takes care of all the countries which are there on the landscape which has been allotted. So what's the biggest advantage we deal with? One is, of course, you get a lot of sharing of best practices as to how to deal with this, right? And number 2 is that, of course, the cost. Cost is definitely a perspective which everyone deal with, right? And the last but not the least is that any one change which you make in an SAP instance gives a positive impact to all the countries which are there on the particular platform, right? So in the other sense, it has a good multiplier effect. So, but it is a journey. I mean, to partner in this journey is very important. Finance is a one who really participates very actively in this to push or agree with the businesses as to how to change, right? So this is something which I have seen pretty much very well accepted, and then change management becomes a part of the business of the finance business partnerships role, so that they have to really take the businesses together with them. And the next piece which is coming up is big one, right? So in today's world, what we talk of is about internal controls, right? So internal controls, which is a part of the risk management, is too important a topic today. And you look at various issues which are happening across the globe, across any country. I think this is something is a bedrock of what we want to do, because the business models are changing, right? So if I just go back as just 3 years before to where we are, to which of the customers and the market segments we are doing, it's simply unbelievable that we change from the core sectors like steel, the cement, the power. We are now trying to do with data centers, pharmaceuticals, food and beverage, which we were not there at all, right? So that means the business model, when we deal with these particular customers, requires immense change or immense need for change. So these businesses require faster delivery, faster decision making, and definitely a very good response from the teams to make sure that they are. I mean, I could very well resonate with Mr. The first context which was said is basically live with the customer for some time to know what the customer needs, and then you will be able to really manage the process within your organization to satisfy a customer, right? So I think this is something which I think is really changing. And with that, I hand over to you, Rakesh.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. And Sridhar, I think you really brought some perspectives on the operating model and the operating structure, the way you have taken a view in terms of how the finance works with the business. So it'd be like really having a partnering team, focused team, or it'd be a shared services which focuses on some of the routine operational stuff, but moving from there to the insights. And reskilling was an important perspective, because I think, as you rightly said, moving away from the zone of, even Ravi was talking in the earlier session as a keynote, by saying it's moving from the zone of comfort to the zone of not having that comfort. So uncomfortable areas like business, etc. Because dealing with auditors is something which you grow up as a finance professional doing it, or managing some of the taxes and compliances is the way you grow up, right? So you bring some a zone of beyond comfort is, I think, is a very important point you talked about, Sridhar, and it's a very interesting perspective. I'll just request a backend to run a poll, because we have a poll, and I will request if the panelist also takes the poll along with the audience. So can I have the poll, please? There you go. So I request the panelist also to take the poll, please. You can just put a response. The question says, what is the most significant change being experienced in finance in your organization? Elevation of customer-based solutions and user experience, increased commitment to environmental, social, and governance goals. Options are implementation of innovative security solutions to secure the fast-growing digitization of assets, tech-driven simplifications, anywhere operations. I think this is something which is talked quite a lot. Moving from long-range goals to real-time dynamic planning, cash liquidity management, others. Let's see how much of our finance colleagues are able to go beyond their comfort zone. We'll keep it on for another 20 seconds. Okay, good. I hope we have sufficient response. So I will request, can we have the results? If you can close the poll and we can have a quick results, please. Oh, that's the kind of results which we have. Okay, so it says tech-driven simplification has been given 32% of the weightage. There are 20% people who have opted for anywhere operations. close to 20% on the elevation of customer-based solutions and user experience. So customer focus is about 20%, anywhere operations is about 20%, and about 30% is tech-driven simplification, right? Of course, the important ones, moving from long-range goals to real-time dynamic planning, 20%. I'm very surprised to hear cash liquidity management is only 1%, right? Which means that very clearly there is a significant change in the expectation from the finance professionals or the finance, right? It is about driving much beyond the typical finance areas to something like digital and tech driven. So maybe I'll go back to you, Rohit, and hear from you some of the, there's a very interesting research element, and which we also at an SSF talks about, is that CFOs are now the custodians for performance, custodian for growth, custodian for digital transformation. Does it means driving only digital within the finance function, or driving digital for the organization? And given a kind of an industry you represent, media and entertainment, with a lot of digital platforms being part of it, how do you respond to it? How do you look at it? So what you're.
Thank you, Rakesh. So first of all, I think digital is a way of life, and no organization can survive without digital adoption. And machines taking over human has been a widely contested topics in many counts. Something which is transactional in nature, repetitive in nature, and a lower strategic intervention, we are obviously moving towards automation. Clearly, my role is, I say, while it is CFO, but, in the recent past, it has all been about digitalization, not only in finance, but also, kind of leading it in our own company as well, especially for our digital platform, Z5, that we have. And I work very closely with our teams there. And, and the reason for that is that, we know how the world is moving, how the customer, preferences are moving. So let me take this question in two things. First of all, what we have done in finance. So in finance, we have looked at three categories. We have looked at, operational finance, which is largely around, P2P and O2C. And this would be the core that we'll have. Then we have business partnering, which are, aspects of finance like budgeting, planning, forecasting, creating long-range forecasts, enhancing productivity. And then financial reporting and compliance, including, taxation, risk management, and internal controls. So let me take each one of them one by one. So as I said, operational finance, and this is the area where major part of digital disruption has happened, and we've seen some repetitive, programmable, laborious tasks, being automated. A decade back, when the outsourcing model started getting popular, technically that's when the real disruption started, and people started accepting a leaner finance function within the organization. So I'm sure many of us would be in a situation where a lot of our operational finance work is already outsourced. In such a case, we have done an evaluation where, we've seen that whether we should, go for a shared services model or automation. And we have looked at it we have done, semi-automation in a lot of places. Business finance, which is the business partnering function of finance. And this is the area where, we have done a lot of automation on the data side. And here, what we are looking at, some of the key things that I would like to highlight is, first is data quality, a very important area, which is often, overlooked while implementing new technology, and especially the quality of the historical data. Then data modeling. A lot of time and effort is invested in data modeling, and clearly it's understood as a restructuring of data to facilitate efficient data processing tools for generating the kind of insights. And it has two aspects. So conceptually data modeling, where the finance person is actively involved, ensuring the business and finance requirements are catered to design the model. And second is the physical data modeling, which would be more of a technical job, which will be done by technical people to convert the conceptual data model to a logical data model for machine consumption. Then we have financial reporting and compliances. And here, this is an area where I have never been completely comfortable in outsourcing totally. What we have is, things like financial closing, consolidation activities. We've used automation tools to speed up the process. And then there are tax, where there are a lot of compliances for GST, TDS, etc. And tax as a function, we have done a lot of automation, and there are loads of service provider who are also coming up with customized solutions in taxation. These can be very cost effective. However, the approach we have been following is developing a simple ETL, an extraction tax transformation load solution, which is in-house, which is cost effective and efficient. So I mean, these are the kind of technology automations we have done here. But these are the ones I spoke about, what we have done in finance. What we have done in business as a whole, I mean, you'll be surprised. It's totally going the digital way. And maybe I'm not the only one leading it, but I'm definitely the one who's hand in glove with our chief executive officer in ensuring that we have a regular monitoring of of our platforms, of our tools, seeing that the customer experience is impeccable. And many of you may be using Z5 platform for the entertainment purposes. And we monitor things like the app crash rate. How is it? How's the overall usage that is there? So part of me is also about driving technology in the business, and of course finance as a whole.
No, absolutely. And some of these very insightful, Rohit. I think particularly talking about the business side of it. Of course, in the finance side, some of these are very progressive actions which already has been taken. And I think that is also enabling you to take that business side of the digital journey is very, very powerful. And I think I'm sure many of us would be already doing it and would be maybe taking a cue from you to see how we can build further on it. I have a question on a follow-through question, but I'll come back to you on specifically on this, some of the operational processes you talked about, but I just want to go to Atul maybe for a minute. And Atul, I'll just request you quickly a minute or two, give a perspective in terms of this whole point of this. We're talking about a lot of information. See, again, the finance is one area where the maximum information is available, right? And we are also talking about finance as a function, and finance, how move away from the function to bring that or behave like a business, if I can say, right? The maximum information is available with you, the maximum insights is possible in the finance. Now, one is compliance, but as I was saying, and I think you talked about this, looking at the past and looking at the future, how do you deal with some of these informations? What are the value you have seen in an organization where finance can provide literally insights to action, to growth? If any examples or anything which you can share your perspective will be very helpful with it. And meanwhile, I just request if people have any questions, they can drop into the Q&A chat box. I can see some questions were there for the previous sessions, but you can keep adding more questions. I will try to take few from here. And if the panelists are having time, they can also respond to some of their questions through the chat box. So sorry, Atul, over to you. Atul, you're on mute. Atul.
Sorry. So, being in a stock exchange, a lot of our data, is actually in the front end of the application, which, is used by brokers. And, believe it or not, a lot of that information was in the hands of the technology team till recently. So if anyone needed data, and I'm not talking here sort of financial information, that of course is with the finance team, but I'm just starting with the business related data that the exchange sort of generates. And a lot of that data was actually, believe it or not, in the hands of the technology team. And anyone in the organization who needed data had to actually go to the technology team to get that data and then sometimes it would take a couple of days, 2-3 days to just for them to take it out from the system and then give it to you, and then your work really started after they gave you that data. So we've really moved from that platform, which was not really working out too well, and we've really moved from that to using data visualization tools in the form of Power BI and Vertica, and we've given the power of that into the hands of the users. So no longer is it really with the technology team, and it's really with all the users of that data. And in terms of the finance or sort of business related analysis of data, that continues to be done with the finance team. And I'll be honest with you in sort of saying that a lot of our investments in technology actually have been on the business side, and somehow as an organization we've long believed that a lot of the technology investments must be done in the front end, on the trading system and the data centers that run those trading systems, etc. And we unfortunately hadn't done enough of it on the support functions, but we've now realized the importance of being able to visualize data and actually create data which is really useful for the organization to take future decisions. And we're now increasingly sort of moving in that direction and giving the power of that really to the users rather than keep it with one department only.
No, absolutely. I think it's and you're rightly saying that how the whole it's not just about the typical monthly MISs we're talking about. We're talking about how to really drive the change in the behavior of your customers. And that's where I think this data has to be used. And I think this is very, again, an important journey for any organization to really take. I just like to take quick a turn to Sridhar, and I'll request, in the interest of the time, because I want to cover a few more specifics. So I'll request if you all can just keep a brief responses will be helpful. So Sridhar, maybe a quick a comment from you on, we all talk about this innovation, digital, and I can see even the Q&A in the chat box. People are talking about a lot of technology tools are available and driving this digital, etc. Now there are even concepts that people are saying now you have to go to a science fiction writer to start visualizing what next, right? Because that's the kind of challenge which we need to give to ourselves. What has been your experience quickly in terms of this digital adoption? If quickly you can talk about, will be very helpful.
I think from for the case of digital adoption, I think it's first one is a customer is a guy who is driving us, number one. And customer experience is something which we always need to keep in mind. And number two, I think as leaders, we need to, first of all, understand these moves, which is happening in the market, and walk the talk from the top. That is extremely important, right? So, and as a CFO, I have always seen that when you adopt these type of technologies which are available outside, you're able to work more swiftly, more agile, more effectively, thereby giving a message to the people in your team to make sure that we adapted this thing. And more importantly, someone was talking about, reverse mentoring. It's a very, very useful tool to move. When you move with youngsters, we could really see how technology is getting adopted in a day-to-day work for us. And there comes the way as to how we need to really put that into our life as well, right? For example, I could tell you, right? So we deal with a lot of channel partners. The channel partners, when we were earlier with, I think they were dealing with more on manual system of writing checks or basically putting orders through and mail and then we getting it. But today, their second generation of their business, second generation has taken over those businesses, which are young people. and they don't want to do this particular topics of doing a manual check and doing. So they are more prone towards using IT as an as an enabler for them to conduct the business. So we were forced to actually create a platform through which they could push orders, they could pay their dues to us, and we also can push invoices into the system from SAP into a portal where they could see their invoices and pay the money on time, right? So this cuts both ways. One, we invest in technology to make the customer experience better, but actually it pays back to us pretty fast. So I think it's very important that we as leaders adapt these type of messages with the customer gives and bring it fast into the business, and then thereby create a delighted customer. That's my take on that, Rakesh.
No, no, absolutely. And starting from a customer was a great example or a great perspective which you talked about, Sridhar, and of course some of the perspective in terms of how to look at the reverse mentoring and those kind of areas. I think this is very interesting, and I'm sure people will look at. I just take a quick perspective from Altaf. Altaf, there are times, and let me use this term, where finance leaders are seen as a role model, and sometimes they also do experiments. And in an organization, if I'm allowed to use the word, they're also guinea pigs, because they are doing a lot of leadership to do something new for the first time, right? Now it's a perspective how you put it, either as a role model and doing it for the first time, or you are being part of an experimentation yourself and trying to be innovative about it, and so on and so forth. So there are various ways the teams are being structured and operating models are done, etc., etc. I think it will be helpful to hear from you the way you see the team being organized, connecting with what we call multiple sets of ecosystem, ecosystem of vendors, ecosystems of partners, the other functions, because you have to cut across the function and not just limit to the only finance. So how do you really work across as an organization, as an enterprise? Just wanted to hear some thoughts and perspective from you. How do you do that at Welspun?
So it's a great question, Rakesh. The one word, if I have to answer, it's ownership. It is. I keep telling in my organization that whoever is the biggest victim becomes the process owner. So if I have to streamline the process, I need to take that ownership myself. And it is coming to your point about co-pilot. The CFO playing the role of co-pilot. So before you get into the co-pilot seat, actually, you have to actually work to build the capability of autopilot. So the aircraft today has an autopiloting capability. Now, many times in the organization, people get confused between autopilot and no pilot. Autopilot doesn't mean there's no pilot. That's a seasoned pilot who knows when to move on auto mode and when to switch to manual mode. That is the kind of judgment and the wisdom which comes with the experience. So, in my view, today CFO has to build that capability of autopiloting in the organization. And there are cases like, for example, controls. Now there are ways and means of automating those controls, and I must have that judgment that which are the controls I still want to have manual. It doesn't make sense to have 100% of the controls automatic. Yeah. So that is the judgment. One is the ownership, and second is the judgment, and the third is actually the most difficult part in all this. While there are processes, there are technology, but it is a people which is the most difficult part. So unless we have all the three ingredients, people, process, and technology working together, it is not going to be a great success. You will eventually succeed, but there'll be a lot of hiccups in the process. So the whole, I would say the single most factor which would help the organization to do this transition is going to be that change management. That people related change management, and there is no shortcut for that. So we have to go through that. While everybody knows how to do it, but every organization will have its own nuances, and everyone will have to go through that process. There's no solution which is going to fit all the problems. So there has to be a ownership, a strong sponsorship. There has to be a strong change management. And the third is about, the entire ecosystem. So it is possible that somebody can do that job better than me. I would rather look at that opportunity also. It is not that I have to do everything in-house. So is there, choosing, first is starting early and second is choosing wisely. So these are the two things one has to keep in mind to achieve success in this transition. What do you, Rakesh?
No, absolutely. Thanks, Altaf, for it. And I think we just top of the hour, but I'll still take a minute to have some quick rapid fires, as I always call it. So I will request the backend to put all of us on the screen as a tiles, please. And I'll take some a very 30 seconds, 10 seconds kind of responses. I'll request each one of us to really take. I think there is a question as well, and I think I've been texted somebody saying that, is it really possible to have a paperless finance? Rohit, any quick response from you?
I think it's very much possible to have a paperless finance. We've all seen it in the COVID-19 times, and I just want to point out that for that you need to have the tech talent, and somebody else also spoke about it, the right tech talent in the finance team. And virtually, I think a lot of companies are running a paperless finance, but there is a government regulations attached to it. You'll need time to tackle GST and all the other things. But yes, it is possible.
Great, thanks. Sridhar, just moving to you, this whole point, even I think in the keynote also, Ravi talked about cost of not taking decisions at the right time. How do you see that?
I think it is pretty much very important. So we ran project businesses, we run engineering businesses. I think cost of not taking a decision on time, right, is going to be more costlier if we don't take it. I think it is better that we take it at the right time, right, and without it's always an 80-20 rule which apply, right? So 8 of the decisions that you take will be right and 20 could be prone to risk. I think that's something where we need to assess and manage. So I would always suggest that we should take decisions.
Oh, wonderful. Absolutely. I think going back to Altaf quickly, and there's a metric which says that the cost of finance over the last few years have come down by 30% because they have really worked towards that, cost optimization in terms of there's a multiple benchmarks, metrics, etc. The question is basically how you really drive that optimization within the finance as an opportunity to encourage the larger set of organization to follow you.
So see, it's the best ways to in finance it becomes easier because there are benchmarks which are transparently available. Therefore, it becomes easier. But for other functions, one of the best ways of driving is to compare yourself with the previous best. So in every organization, if you look at any cost structure, there would be times where we would have achieved the best cost structure. So if I can capture that or that practice which I followed and push towards that, that's the best way to drive the entire organization towards the cost optimization. So pick up the best ever achieved and benchmark against that. And that best ever achieved itself will keep changing every year.
Sure. Thanks. Atul, just a quick question from you. There has been a lot talked about the finance leaders doing multiple things, wearing multiple hats. If I can loosely say, they are juggler par excellence, right? So they are doing multiple things at the same point of time. How do you manage multiple priorities and given this whole expectation? So any quick tips which you'd like to give it to the people logged in? One or two tips. You're on mute, Atul.
I think basically at any sort of given point in time, you've got to see what's the most important thing for an organization. So, and you've got to basically prioritize, things that are important at that point in time. And those things can keep changing. It's very difficult to say this will always remain. So, for example, during COVID times, maybe cost management when revenues were under pressure was important. Capital raising or looking at sort of future growth opportunities that became increasingly more important, for CFOs to look at. So I would really say that, just look around the organization and see what's really the most important at that point in time and really go for that. And these things do keep changing, but if you understand your business well and the drivers of your business, you'll also figure out what's really the most important thing for the organization to concentrate on at any given point in time.
I'll have to cut you, Atul, here, but thanks for that. Just pick 10 seconds from maybe Rohit, you, Sridhar, and Altaf. So Rohit, first you. One tip based on today's conversation which you like to live with the people who have logged in. One tip. One guidance which you like.
I would say have a very good data strategy. So if you have a good data strategy, I think that's going to really help you in the coming times. If that's the tip that I can give,
Very nice. So data strategy. How about you, Altaf?
Remain relevant.
Remain relevant. Okay, very nice. That's interesting. How about you, Sridhar?
I think ESG is going to be a main topic for all of us. I think start to learn about ESG and the contribution of finance for that.
That's fantastic. So remain relevant, think about ESG, look at data strategy, think of what is right at that point of time. It could be cash, liquidity, capital gains, etc., etc. I think this is fantastic conversation. I could have continued for another half an hour, 45 minutes easily with a lot of questions which I have. I know we have a limitation because there's a next panel which is already waiting and they are all peeping in at a point of time. So I'll have to let you all go. And I think I can't thank with my words. I think it was really, really nice having all of you here. I'm sure we'll have more conversations later. So thank you, Rohit, for joining in, finding this time and sharing your perspective. Thank you, Atul, for finding this time, sharing your perspectives. Thank you, Altaf. Really appreciate your time. I think we have been trying to have you, Altaf, for some time, but good to have you today. And Sridhar, it was lovely meeting you. And thanks for your perspective. It was really lovely. Thank you all, and have a great evening and a day ahead. You can continue to hear the next panel.
Thank you. Well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I can see Anand already on the screen. So can we have Anand and myself on the screen? Yeah.
Thanks, Rakesh. This was a fabulous interaction with few top-notch CFOs and very well moderated by Rakesh to get best out of the wise people. And as we wait for everyone on this panel to show up, I can see almost.
Hey, Anand, I'm here.
Yeah. Welcome, Lalita. Welcome. So, hi, Dr. Rastogi, Serge, Sudipto, and we are waiting for Geeta. And where is Hari? Has Hari logged in?
Geeta's on now as well.
Yeah, hi Geeta.
Hi,
And
Anand,
so is Hari here. So great to see the entire panel here. It's so exciting and invigorating that the first days, the last and final session on this Finance Leaders E-Summit is turning out to be a very power-packed roundtable of the GBS leaders. And it is my privilege to welcome everyone wherever you are and tell you, depending on your location, a good morning or a good afternoon, or in some cases, a great evening. Hari is already grinning from all the way from Sydney. Without further ado, I would like to start by saying once again, welcome and introducing the theme of this session, which fits in so well into the overall theme of this summit, which is like digital unlocking value through digital leapfrogging and new operating models in finance. And we have heard the keynote from Ravi earlier this afternoon, India time. And also the previous panel, and everybody was underlining, putting it in bold, highlighting the term digital. And our session is actually going to cover a facet of that, and specifically for shaping the future of compliances, analytics, and reporting through technology. As we all know that we are talking of global business services leaders and their roundtable here, and our audience is largely comprising of those people, including mostly in finance and maybe few beyond finance, and many who have actually kind of started from finance but started looking at multi-functions in their respective organizations. So all said and done, the torchbearer role of the finance cannot be overemphasized in this context. So finance has been at the fulcrum of all these, many of these new initiatives. And when we talk of not only adopting, but leveraging advanced, more relevant technologies, sometimes seemingly unrelated to our functions, but otherwise were very powerful. And as we go along in this session, we will get a few examples highlighted. So how we are able to improve performances and ultimately unlock values for our respective organizations. And a very, very typical from a GBS lens, how we look at it. So with that, I wanted to say that in our theme, we starting with what is the current environment, considering that the GBS have started maturing, their roles are being redefined, and hence the entire meaning around uses of technology is also evolving, and if I can use the term, elevating. Gone are the days when we were content with automating some of the programmable, repeatable functions and be happy about that. A lot of that was taken care of in many senses, typically on the bookkeeping side of our processes by the modern ERPs. Further, a lot of that came into some level of user-driven automation by better uses of certain simple tools which are available on your desktop and which are so user-friendly, and people started crunching their own time spent on their processes to much less, and started writing their own small little macros, or small little routines and all that, and that created a different kind of challenge for organizations. So that became a charter to kind of control and put some kind of method to that madness of user-driven automation, if I can use the word. But a well-structured, well-thought-through strategic utilization of technology in the sphere of what we are currently talking about in terms of compliances, analytics, and reporting has been, to my mind, a sphere where I'm sure everybody's experience could be very, very wide, but where we have yet to cover a fair amount of distance. A lot of work has been done, a lot more can be done. That is how I see it. So without further ado, I think the most important aspect of this will be, where are we in our journey in the entire GBS strategy? That will in turn define what is right for us, right in present for us. And with that backdrop in mind, I would like to turn to you, Geeta, to share your perspective in terms of how do you see this whole thing of moving ahead from simple automation to actually what we have started calling ourselves as tech integrated business services. We are no longer just getting technology to enable it. We have even in many cases crossed the stage of leveraging it. Now we are talking of riding technology to deliver on the financial processes and services. So tech is also integrated part of our day-to-day life. And there will be certain other aspects of it which we will cover in this session as we go along, some interesting, thought-provoking, maybe controversial points that I will like to touch upon later in this session. But before that, from assessing the readiness level of the organization and also choosing the right strategy to make the best possible business impact, how do you look at it?
Sure. Thank you, Anand. Thank you for giving this opportunity to me to be a part of this distinguished panel and with you as a key moderator. So first of all, before I go to specifically answer your question, Anand, I think it's just worth pausing to understand what the landscape looks like. So today we have a little over 1,300 plus GBS centers or global capability centers, GCCs or GICs, depending on what you call them in India. And these are employing over 1.3 million people. And they contribute about 33 to 34 billion US dollars to the revenue every year. This is as per NASSCOM report. Now, if you look at the value paradigm here again, typically these have started out as cost centers, low cost centers, and then they evolve into becoming capability centers. And then moving further up, they become innovation centers. And then, of course, the most sort of high end value position will be like a business partner. And generally, based on the studies and reports that we've seen so far, out of the 1,300 plus GCCs or GBS centers we have, probably less than 5% have touched that sort of pinnacle to say they are at the high end of the spectrum, offering services as an equal partner. Probably less than 10% are between, somewhere between innovation center and partnering role. And bulk of them are somewhere falling between capability centers and low cost centers. And because we know every year, at least 100, if not more, keep getting added to, the global business services landscape. So I think looking at that from that perspective, I genuinely feel that we have a huge opportunity here, and the value proposition really that the GBS centers ought to be looking at is really looking at leveraging the standardization and consistency which we have. Bulk of the GCCs have achieved, like you mentioned, bulk of the GBS centers have achieved standardization and consistency because that's where you start off. And the next step is really to scale it up and look at how you enhance the quality and efficiency through better digital application and use of right technology. And now pretty much use of data and analytics is now a common buzzword. And really I can look at some of the examples around us where these have been actualized. I know some of our colleagues in the panel will talk about it in detail, but I think fundamentally for us, the first thing we need to realize as GBS centers is why are we talking about so much about digitalization and technology adoption? This is because some of these centers have seen success, whether it's the Genpacts or the Siemens of the world, or some of the organizations whose people are representing, this panel. So what I'm seeing is that application of technology for the right outcomes is first of all important. So we got to understand that for a GCC or a GIS or a global business service center to transform from becoming a capability center to becoming an innovation and a high value partner is to look at what are those areas where these processes could be automated in a meaningful way, where there has to be a level of intelligence applied by the decision makers for which the analytics and insights are going to be important. But fundamentally, to remove the problems around errors and lack of standardized approaches, we need to bring in the right technologies. So people will increasingly talk about robotic process automation, hyperintelligence, and all of that. But fundamentally, what we need to understand is what is the expectation really from the finance shared service function? Where are we today? I think if you look at the overall landscape again, around 35 to 36% of the GBS centers in India are primarily providing finance shared services as a function support service, which is a fairly large number. So that means majority of them have already evolved to a position that you're talking about. So when you look at what's next, it's really at that tipping point where you have to review whether you want to build some of these tools in-house or you want to really buy COTS product from outside to see what gives you the best bang for the buck. And I think, we will be, I'll be interested to hear about, what Sergey and others talk about in this space, because some have probably built some of those tools in-house.
Yeah.
But clearly we have to leverage the ecosystem more than ever before, I feel, Anand, if we are to make a success of this whole, journey. But I think we have a huge opportunity out there to tie this to our strategy in terms of the planning and, in terms of where you want to be in the value chain.
Thanks, Geeta. You put it in a very good perspective, quoting from some of the statistics that tell us what is the overall GBS landscape, and within that, what is the share of the finance, and also a very good guess about how many of them have actually progressed to the level that others are still aspiring to. So that will remain a kind of a continuum, but that was Geeta, and I'm not taking special extra time in introducing each one, but she comes from a global EPC firm, engineering, procurement, and construction firm, WS Atkins, and she has done both finance and operations now in her portfolio. So that is what I was referring to, that that is also an interesting facet of this journey of the GBS. Quite often, starting with the finance, quite often, but then progressing similarly in most cases beyond other functions as well, with the finance leaders providing that extra push and support beyond their core function. So that's an interesting aspect. I would, Geeta, you also mentioned a very good point about, and that we will touch up certainly about, what is been the experience of developing some of these technology tools, specifically in the area of compliance, analytics, and reporting, as in-house versus, off the shelf, whatever is available, and no one size fits all, but we will hear more. Here, I would request Sudipto to just, if you want, if you like, please do pitch in and share some of your experiences, more focusing on how did you go about in terms of deciding the right timing and right area to focus on in terms of organizational readiness as well as the impact parameters, and tying into the overall strategy, which goes beyond just the contours of the GBS.
Sure, thanks, Anand. Would love to talk about that. And the interesting thing is that we are talking about shaping the future of finance through technology, and specific compliance, reporting, analytics, etc. And see, I work for a company called Berkadia Services India Private Limited. We are the GIC for the company called Berkadia, which is a Berkshire Hathaway and Jefferies Financial Group company. Now, if you look at the vision of this company, this vision, the company's vision is to not only build technology for itself and its processes, it actually wants to disrupt the industry, the entire commercial real estate industry. So I think by default, we become a TIBS. We didn't have an option, so that was sort of integrated as part of our tech strategy. And one of the things that was decided was that we want to go and build the technology for ourselves and the industry completely in-house. This leverages, of course, the usual AI, ML, etc. And from my personal experience, when we talk about automating reporting or analytics for that matter, I think the role of the OCR has been very, very significant. So the areas that we chose, coming back to your original question, were based on pieces where we thought that the manual effort was intense, and that's kind of commonsensical. There were a lot of different kinds of inputs that were coming in which had to be processed, and that's why I mentioned OCR, which has played a significant role. But the only aspect as we think of the future, and I'll just make this point and move it back to you, Anand, is the importance of thinking about people and technology together. And again, going back to Berkadia's vision, it says We'll achieve this by investing in people and technology in that order. As the GICs mature and as we bring in more robotics, more automation in whatever form, we need to think of how do we upskill and upgrade our current workforce. Because I think as we progress into the future, we'll see that coming, that knowledge gap being created in the GICs. And that will be a problem that all of us GIC leaders will have to tackle with probably sooner than later in the future.
Sure, very well put, Sudipto. And you actually have touched the core of the whole subject about emphasizing on the shaping of the future. So while we will be talking more about the compliances, reporting, and analytics as part of the various GBS functions, but the eyes will be set on how do we shape the future, remain future fit, and I dare say relevant as well. So moving on, may I request Lalita, please share your perspectives in this context.
Thank you, Anand. I think as probably Geeta rightly mentioned, if you look at the number of GCCs that exist in the country, or historically, the whole shared services or the GBO or the GCC story for the world is at least a maturity of 2 decades. And one of the reasons why probably finance has been the forefront or runner of this, the whole setup and other stuff, because historically organizations are focused on the process standardization of financial systems or the financial processes in order to be able to report better or stay ahead in the game or understand financials. So as a result of that, I think historically finance has been considered as probably one of the most standardized processes for any organization. And hence, if you talk about really from a future point of view, in my opinion, this is the area where we have, even within the GCC space, the most experienced workforce, right? And as you rightly mentioned, a lot of finance leaders are going and either spreading their wings into the other processes or mentoring other processes, making their financial shared services into multifunctional things. But, as a new entrant from the GCC perspective into this market, what I can say is one of the reasons why organizations choose to do this kind of stuff is because of the talent that is out there who had probably been there, done that. Today, if we talk about specifically, we talk about organizations having walked this path or having specific knowledge, as specific as can we get a finance specialist who had done this kind of transformation in the retail space, right? So we can get as specific as that when it comes to talent, and the whole cross-pollination of the talent from organizations to organization, taking the best practices, showing the organizations what can be done. I think that is probably one of the forms the basis for our success as an industry, because we are able to adapt from one another, learn from one another. We also as an industry do a heavy sharing, right? So be it a technology, be it a process, be it a new things or setting up a new center of competence, we always look at each other and say, have you done this? What has been your learnings? And taking those learnings and moving forward and not making the same mistakes probably, and creating new experiences. That is what is pretty essential for us to stay together as a community and move forward, in my opinion. Hope that answers.
Yeah, certainly. And we would definitely like to come back to you, Lalita, as you also bring in such a diverse experience in this field. And now that you are part of the Inca group, so more variety, so to say, in terms of the perspectives can be taken in. But at this stage, I would like to request Hari, who is from Thomson Reuters and has done remarkable work directly in the field of utilizing digital and technology in the space of compliances in particular, and but also in reporting and analytics, to share some specifics how it has been with the Thomson Reuters for the last 10, 12, 15 years, and what is that we can actually learn from that.
Sure, thank you, Anand. I think if we look at compliance as a whole, right, what we're finding, and this is happening across each region as well, is government authorities are investing as much in technology that we're seeing, if not greater, than most organizations. So they're getting smarter. They're wanting more information. If you look at examples in the UK, we've got Making Tax Digital, where they're like, I don't want you to calculate what you need to comply. You give me the raw data and I will tell you how much you owe me. So as governments are starting to improve in terms of their technology, in terms of increasing the demands, as organizations, what we're seeing our customers do is they have to keep up with that. They have to look at how are we going to maintain this? So we're seeing, rather than looking at purely just, hey, do I look at building my own solution or do I look at adopting a separate solution? Regardless of this, what is that end outcome that I need to achieve? Which is, how do I get this information faster that I internally can pick up on any errors before it goes through to a government organization or before it even goes through to my auditors to be then able to review. So and this is again where I see a lot of the GBS teams and organizations growing. They're going higher up in that value chain because they understand the transactional data really well. As I think one of the previous panelists mentioned, we've been doing this for the past 20 years. So as we start moving up that value chain, let's not just look at the numbers. What are the numbers actually telling us? How does this impact our business? You become that true business partner. And then you're driving, okay, let's use technology over and on top of this to then meet our compliance requirements. Once you understand that, then you're able to do a lot of the reporting, the analytics that kind of come hand in hand with that. So this is a space that is very exciting. It is a space that, we are seeing that technology being utilized in multiple different ways. And when I talk to my customers, this is what they're looking at. It's not just purely from, do we just do technology for the sake of it? Let's just automate what's there. How are we making sure that we're covering what governments are asking from us as well, and keeping that up to date?
Wonderful. Good to hear that perspective from you. And so this is probably a good time to hear from Sergey, your experience on creating some of these technology initiatives, both in-house or otherwise, and benefiting in your GBS operations from those.
Yeah, thank you, Anand. So I think that's a good point, because sometimes we tend to look immediately outside for packages that can help us solve any type of problem that we have. And for sure, we do go outside and we use certain packages, like for process mining, for example, we're implementing Celonis. I think a lot of my colleagues here are considering something similar with a similar type of tool or different tool to really mine the data that we see in our processes. And of course, there it would not make a lot of sense to try to develop something on your own because it already exists in the market, has been thoroughly thought through. But I think in other areas, we have really developed the capabilities in-house. And I think mainly on the advanced analytics side, we've developed the capability in-house. We could have gone outside and looked at some packages on how do we bring insights into our finance data, because we have access to all finance data of the company. Right? We have all supplier data, customer data, accounting, every single transaction we have access to. And I think as a center, as a GBS, we need to use that a lot more to bring insights to drive business value. So that's why we started experimenting a couple of years ago. And we developed that internally. And I think some of the main benefits that I see is sometimes developing that capability internally and developing the algorithms, the dashboards, the tools internally, is that I think you can experiment with something pretty cheap. You can move fast, you can experiment and see, does this make sense? Does it really drive business value or does it not? So we had several experiments that drove amazing business value and helped us to save millions in our P&L or clean up the balance sheet. We had some other initiatives that completely failed. We spent a couple of months trying to develop an algorithm, and then we saw, man, this doesn't bring any business value. And then your investment is less. You learn after 2-3 months, you can close it and move on to the next one. So I think this ability to experiment, to be nimble, to see where can you add value and where not, is one thing. So also in terms of access to data, we see that your data is extremely important when you want to connect a new system. You need some kind of data lake, or your data needs to be organized in a certain way. You need to connect to it, which also again has quite a lead time to even be able to use the package or the tool. If you again develop internally, you can kind of work around and work with some temporary data, let's say, some simple dumps that at least you can already create your experiment again. And I think the last benefit that I see is that you also develop the capability in-house, that you develop people in your company who start upskilling themselves, reskilling themselves. Because one of the biggest challenges that we had when we started that journey a couple of years ago is that we had our traditional, let's say, finance people or operations people who had no clue, including myself when we started. We had no clue what can we do with advanced analytics. What can we do with the skills that those people bring through algorithms. And I think by creating this team and capability internally, we can literally put people together. They can talk to each other. They can connect. The analytics people learn about the business because they sit next to them every single day. They learn about business. On the other hand, our operations or finance people, they learn about analytics because, again, they sit next to their colleagues who explain them some basic concepts of R or algorithms or something like that. So I think those are some of the benefits. But of course, once you develop something internally, it's crucial that you then productize it, that you do not just create something that you leave out there and then try to develop 5-6 times the same thing around the world. You productize it, create a package, an internal package out of it that you can then redeploy in different zones of the company. So today we're productizing some of those solutions and rolling them out across the world in AB InBev.
So very interesting comments, and we'll have to come back specifically your point in getting this important huge benefit of creating those in-house talents. And I can connect it with what we learned in the keynote today of those reverse mentoring that we all need, and you will have a army of those people who could possibly qualify as those reverse mentors. But I think we've all been waiting for getting some insights from our friend and wise old, not so old, but wise man, Dr. Rastogi. So Sanjeev, now that you have been into so many such situations, and now that you had a powerhouse of knowledge as part of the the Deloitte shared services, how do you see this entire topic of reshaping our future in the GBS world through riding on the technology, specifically in the field of analytics, reporting, and compliance? So your insights, please.
No, thank you, Anand. And I think my elite panel, Geeta, and everybody spoke. So I think this is the GBS is a journey, Anand. So what has happened in most of the centers, they start with the transactional processes, and we know 87% of, I have the data because 80% of the transactional data globally is now done through the GCCs. We have concessional tasks, which are basic reporting, SAP reporting, etc., being done. Now the GBS are moving to a different directions. They are looking at data insights and analytics. So what happens, the first 2-3 years is you need to prove as a center that you are able to process the transactions. Now the maturity curve has come because the world has seen that India can do it. There are a lot of GBS centers. The talent has moved around. There's a proof that this is success. Now they're looking at end-to-end process and multi-functional GBS centers. So if you look at earlier, there were finance centers. now looking at the success, the global organization think this is an extension of the business and not as a center. And you bring in multi-processes, whether it is supply chain, whether it is procurement. Now I see IT and HR coming in. And then the third thing is, you are driving digital from these centers now. So not only the center becomes digital, but the entire digital implementation across the organization happens through the GCCs, which we talked about. And I've seen that happening because the talent availability, the fungibility, and the level of knowledge which is available in India is incomparable across globe. So I've seen centers where we have done cloud, we have done drone technology, we have done R&D, where we have gone ahead and implementing SAP, we are implementing Workday, whether it is SuccessFactors. So we are creating COEs within India. Now the centers are becoming multifunctional. We have talent available for each. And the process, end-to-end process knowledge earlier, which used to be outside the India, now is coming to India. So you own end-to-end process. And that helps to implement technology, whether it is RPA. I think RPA is very, very widely used in India GBS centers. I would give you a data that 40% of GCCs are already on the RPA journey. Some have failed, some have success. A lot of digital tools are coming in. Tableau, you look at Power BI, you look at Hyperion, whether you look at everything else that is getting implemented vastly. The time to report and month-end close is becoming very, very, because you are a global organization, so you want to close your books. So you have Blackline being implemented. Your closing has come down from 6-7 days to less than 3 days now. So, and then you're bringing all these compliance tools and technologies, because since you are a multiple centers, and it's not only one center now. Earlier, the India center was the cost arbitrage and all that. The cost arbitrage is one thing. I think it's about the talent pool, the fungibility of talent. I have seen talent moving from here to the overseas offices. And the most important thing before I end is that you are implementing the business strategy of the organization through the GBS. And that's important. And that's what's happening in Deloitte as well, that due to COVID-19, a lot of companies and all our parent companies' strategy has changed. And GBS has become the engine to lead that strategy and implement that strategy for the organization. And that's how GBS plays a key role, and it's very well now getting integrated as part of the core business.
So good points made by you, Sanjeev. So Sudipta, how would you respond to that in terms of Barcadia, the GBS becoming the core to drive the strategy at a global level? How is your take on that? Are you there? Are you still trying to reach there?
No, I think as Sanjeev said, it is a journey, but when it comes to Barcadia, I think we are significantly advanced in that journey. See, 50% of Barcadia sits in India. And a large part of the technology team, a large part of the operations team, in fact, some of the mature operations team are as much as 75 to 80% sitting in India.
Wow.
So not only the knowledge sits here, the technological capability sits here. So we work in a very, very integrated manner with our US partners to contribute to the strategy and then work on the development. See, the idea is that, and that's the advantage of having an agile methodology. So we like to fail fast. And coming back to Serge's point, and that's critical when you're developing technology in-house. And our choice to develop technology in-house was because we wanted to disrupt the industry. Had it already been out there, the whole purpose would have been lost. And that was the sort of driver to do that. Coming back to your question, Anand, that's where we are, and I think we're seeing loads of benefits, including some of the ones that Sergey listed. I love some of the points that he made about having that skill here in one of the GICs. That is absolutely crucial.
So we have heard some very interesting and diverse experiences in terms of leveraging on talent internally, developing it internally, even if it means taking some risk of failing, but then failing fast. And because you want to remain more disruptive in the marketplace, then a packaged tool may possibly enable versus taking advantage of various tested, tried and tested, reliable tools available in the market, and several of them were narrated by Sanjeev in particular, but others as well. And so this has been very interesting, diverse experiences that we have understood about. And I would like to hear a little bit more from you, Geeta, before I push it back to Hari. So any thoughts from you, Geeta, how you have been going about this, solving for this cauldron of in-house versus bought in, and a combination of both?
Sure. Thanks, Anand. What I wanted to actually add a bit more about, my own sort of role is, yes, I moved from finance to operations, and right now, actually, I head the digital, sort of delivery from India, the India Center. And to be honest, some of the points that both I think, Sudipto made on Berkadia and Sergi made in a way resonate with me. So we have 2 or 3 teams, and that I'll speak about that before I answer your question, Anand. We have 2, 3 teams in India Center. One is a digital or an automation team, which actually comprises people who come from hardcore engineering, some people who come from the external IT programming world, and some coming from other parts of the organization. I mean, I myself I come from a finance background primarily, but I've cross-skilled and upskilled and all of that. But so what we are doing with this team is that exactly what Sergi mentioned, which is, to begin with, we tried ways of automating some of the repetitive tasks, which are, let's say, high volume, less complex, and more predictable, so that the manual effort that goes into delivering those processes can be reduced, and you drive better quality, better efficiency, and better predictability. So that's one thing that the team does. And there have been some in-house solutions we have developed, which I could say we have almost productized, to borrow Sergi's words. These are more in the engineering domain, but I don't see the day being far off when we have something that is coming up on HR or finance. So there are a couple of solutions which we have sold to our external clients. These are in-house solutions. This is more in the area of infrastructure asset management, helping the asset owners, like owners of highways and railway tracks, to maintain their assets, driving in through predictive analytics as well, where we have done some work for one of our clients in UK, where applying machine learning, where we used unstructured data to draw the patterns and then come up with where the roads could require some interventions, just as an example. So in-house team is doing some work. But at the same time, I must say that the bigger picture is, yes, in India, we are delivering the implementation of design transformation for us, which is very big part of our journey, digital future journey. And as part of this, our India technology team is extremely central to delivering these solutions, to actually creating some of these tools which will be adopted by the entire organization across regions. So partly we do want to leverage that. But one thing we want to be clear, at least from our perspective, is we are still going to be basically fundamentally an engineering and project management services company, which has a number of areas, including support functions and shared service centers, but we will not become truly a product company. So there will be a combination of in-house developed products, as well as we will buy off-the-shelf products.
Thank you.
So that's the approach we are taking. And even with respect to finance, we have done POCs on applying RPA to some of our finance processes, and these have been successful. We are looking to scale up those. So it will be a combination, I see, Anand, of both in-house and COTS.
Got it. Thank you. Back to you, Hari. How do you see it? Do you see people are both kind of experiences, and some are still talking about high volume processes being automated, whereas many have moved forward on specifics of compliance reporting and analytics? How would you put forth your advice? And by the way, we also have started getting some interesting questions from the audience. I would request fellow panelists to try and respond on the chat box itself if you wish. Otherwise, we will see to take them up towards the end of this conversation. But before that, I have a few, as I had mentioned earlier, couple of very thought-provoking questions for the entire panel. Before I go there, Hari, all yours.
Sure. Thanks, Anand. So I think when we look at the question of, in-house versus, being able to actually purchase an off-the-shelf solution, there's usually 4 factors that we'd like to consider, right? So there's the people, the process, the data, and then finally the technology. As Sudipta mentioned, right, the core fundamental is, do you have the people to be able to do this? And if you don't have the people, then it becomes moot point. What we're finding with a lot of organizations that we talk to, the people that are exploring this take an interest in it, but they do it over and above their day-to-day activities. So while that's really great and it brings up benefits to the organization, it's not necessarily scalable. Right. So then we look at, process and the data. These two are fundamental parts as well. A lot of the organizations we talk to at the moment, they have either poor processes or poor data or the ability to try and bring those together. So without those, it doesn't matter whether you build it in-house or if you go out. Without those 3 fundamental pillars in place, you can put any technology, and as they commonly say, you put garbage in, you're going to get garbage coming out of it as well. So the key thing that we look at it beyond this is, before you kind of look at that, let's look at the people, look at the process, and then look at the data. Then look at the technology. Both Sudipta, Serge, and Geeta gave some really great examples of, when you're a disruptor in the industry, when you're wanting to challenge that industry, no one's actually doing that. You have the skill sets within the teams. You're wanting to build that. You've got your operations team sitting with your analysts right next to each other, and the finance team will say, it's like, I didn't even know that I could ask this type of a question and get this type of an answer. So in those instances, it really makes, when you're taking very serious business decisions that are unique to your organization. When we look at compliances, though, these are standard things that are happening across organizations and across countries. So trying to build something with that in-house is not cost effective. It doesn't make sense for you to go build out something that 100 people out there would either have a standard solution that you can use, or a very specialized solution that caters for, say, your tax, your compliance reporting, your financial statements preparation, all these types of things where you don't necessarily have to spend that money in-house to get that same level of scale. So that's where I see it. It's looking at those processes, looking at the people, looking at the data, and then look at, okay, how do we actually use the right technology for us to solve that problem?
Wonderful. And at this stage, I think we have a poll question coming up for the audience. And of course, it is also open for the panelists to participate. Can we have the poll question, please? What is the most significant area of change likely in your GBS organization in the next 1 year? And there are many options. So we will have probably 30 seconds for everyone to read through and pick one. So we can't vote, even if we want to. Okay. I think you can take it off now. People would have responded. I'm sure the backend can see it. Wonderful. We will get the result soon. Ah, that was pretty fast and very close. My. The top 3 are like neck to neck. Increased use of automation, increased use of data analysis, and adoption of next-gen technology-based systems. So anything which had to do with technology is coming on top. That's very, very insightful. Thank you, everyone, for having participated so enthusiastically in this. And now comes my favorite part of this session. I've got a couple of questions for everyone on the roundtable here. And I will appreciate if you are put on the tile mode so that it remains it becomes even livelier, tech enabled. So the first and very interesting question that I will throw at each one of you, and whichever order you want to pick it up, but I would like to do a quick round drop, short, quick 30-second responses. And the question goes like this: are quality and speed at loggerheads with each other? What we mean to say is, with the need to crunch around, turnaround time and speed to market, are we likely to compromise on other service imperatives? So it is the speed versus quality issue when you are looking at leveraging technology. Who wants to go first? Maybe Sanjeev.
Yeah, and so.
Oh, Lalita is already there. Okay, yeah. So ladies.
So I think definitely both speed and quality is important, but I think you can really, they say you can really go faster, but you're going in the wrong direction. It doesn't really take you to the destination, right? So I think the quality aspect has to be paid attention to along with the speed. You can be 80% right and faster rather than trying to be 100% right and be slow. Or because the cost of rework is going to be a lot more expensive than doing it right the first time. And in that process, definitely you can't take forever. So you need to hit the midway between cost and quality. But in my mind, the quality is first.
So here we are talking of speed versus quality. Let me remind everyone.
Yeah, the speed.
So Sanjeev, you were saying something.
Yeah, and I think quality takes anyway a lead vis-a-vis speed is concerned. Quality, because whatever GCC or GBS does today does impact the final customer or the end customer. And as an organization, what you're trying to do, you are trying to create a personal experience for your customer and a better experience. And that's how you're trying to compete. So I'd say quality. Technology will bring speed, but not at the cost of quality. So the cost of quality is very, very high. But I would say I will go for quality any day.
Sarjay.
I think it's two interesting insights, though. I think first of all, speed, I think, is super important in the world today. So I don't think we can just say that we're going to choose quality over speed, because if you're too late, you might already miss some market share, some market value. So we cannot, I think, just choose between speed or quality. I think we need to prioritize in which areas are we willing to compromise on quality, in which areas are we not willing to compromise on quality. And I think, to Sanjeev's point, you cannot compromise on quality for the user experience. No, we're in the consumer goods business. We're implementing worldwide marketplaces. We're implementing home delivery apps, etc. On the user experience, you cannot sacrifice. So there, I completely agree. You need to have great quality application, great quality tool, but you need to still deliver it pretty fast. You can, however, sacrifice on everything that is not user experience, right? So and a great point that, as I heard earlier in the other panel, Atul make, that often then leads to the fact that the back office gets sacrificed, because a lot of the work is still being done manually in old technologies, in legacy systems in the back end, because we need the speed on the front end, right, towards the customer. So I think I agree, quality on the customer side, you cannot sacrifice, but everything else typically gets sacrificed to get to speed to market.
Good ones. Sudipta?
So I don't think they're at loggerheads, but I think the balance is very important. If the balance is out of whack, it will be at loggerheads. So it's like, a racing car, a Formula One can drive really fast because it has wonderful brakes. And if you put the same brakes in a lawnmower, it's a different story, right? So as long as the organization and the leadership is able to balance the priority of speed and quality in the right dose, depending on what we are catering to, I think that's the solution to it.
Wonderful. Hari, what would you say to that?
So some very good insights from the rest of the panel members. I'd agree as well. It is that balancing act. If I had to choose one over the other, mine will be quality as well. Because I think once you actually get the quality, the technology and the ability to get that speed comes with that. And again, specifically when we're talking from a GBS perspective, the amount of stakeholders and the amount of things that you're looking at from a compliance perspective and analytics perspective, it can go very badly wrong if you don't have that quality in there.
Okay, so very interesting perspectives, and I think we have not yet heard Geeta on this particular question.
Yeah, sure, Anand. Some excellent thoughts shared by my fellow panelists. I think, my take would also be similar in terms of saying that because we're talking about the finance function, obviously numbers are extremely pivotal to running the business. So you can't afford to have, any incorrect data there. So quality has to be top notch. But the way we get to that point, we have to build more speed and agility. So we will have to exercise greater speed to maintain quality. So that would be my response, really.
Absolutely. I'm not sharing any personal view, but I'm also trying to sort of balance this whole thing against what was said, that it is about disruption. And can you be disruptive enough without speed? That's a question I would still leave for everyone to judge. Now comes another one for all the way of everyone on the panel. And it's even more controversial and thought-provoking. Is it true that the technology can be both a boon and a bane? How can finance stay relevant and not become a slave of tech-defined environment? So the question here is about not only speed, but it is also about relevance. Are we moving towards a world where there is a potential situation of the tail wagging the dog? There are some grins already. So Hari, maybe you would like to go first.
So because I love technology, right? This is often the thing. There are moments where I absolutely love technology, where it does exactly what I want it to. And there are other times where I want to just pick up my laptop and throw it out the window. So I do agree. It is, is it a boon or a bane? I think the main thing that I find is what's the problem that we're trying to solve, right? And with the technology that you're using, are you using the right technology in the right context? And that's what makes all the difference. Any technology project that you look at is, if you don't have a good governance, if you don't have a good vision of, hey, this is what we're actually trying to achieve, and this is what we're trying to aim from, whether it's we're going to experiment and we expect to fail 80% of the time, that's fine. But if you don't have that defined, then it becomes really hard to try and drive that technology aspect. In the long run, technology will always be the boon. It's just how do we actually manage that? And if I go to the earlier points mainly, it's a lot more about that change management and how do you take the people aspect rather than the technology aspect.
Wonderful. And kindly treat it as a rapid fire, because we are having a lot of audience questions also in front of us. And I would like us to spare a few minutes before we come up the hour for that. So quick response from you, Sergey.
Yeah, I think it can be both, and I think it depends on how the technology gets implemented. And I can share a very simple example that I've experienced in the last 1 year during COVID is chatbots. I personally hate chatbots because I think it puts the complexity of the help desk of the service center with the user, right? So if it's not properly implemented, what tends to happen is that your decision tree of questions gets put in front of the user, and the user spends a lot of time trying to figure out what his problem is and how he gets to a solution. And then I think technology doesn't get implemented well. The user experience is terrible. And then tech, tends to be pretty bad. On the other hand, I've also experienced with another company, I'm not sure if I can mention the name here, but in India, I think it was Zomato, and they had an amazing chatbot. Because I went in, I had a delivery that was incorrect. I go in and I am asked 2-3 questions. You get a refund or you get a new delivery. So super simple, super straightforward, and amazing customer service. So I think the same technology can be implemented in a way that you put a lot of burden on your customer and it becomes something that you don't want to interact with anymore. Or you can make it very simple, very user-friendly, same technology, and it makes the user experience amazing and it can drive additional sales.
Wonderful. I'm with you when it comes to chat boxes. Generally had those. Okay, just sharing. Okay, Sudipto, you would like to say something about finance and technology? Who is riding on whom?
Sure. I think since time immemorial, whatever science has given us is a boon and a bane. Depends on how it's used. And if we use technology without taking care of data, process, and people, it's going to be a bane. It's not going to work. Very simple. And I think the point about of finance remaining relevant, I think it's always about looking forward. I think that's the point of arrival for finance. How do I predict what's going to happen 6 months down the line, 9 months down the line? And that's where I think the elements of the technology related to predictive analytics, etc., become very, very important. And it's not the technology again; it's the people who are interpreting the data.
Correct.
There are a lot of technologies to create financial models, but the person who's interpreting to the data, that skill is more important than the technology per se for the finance function to remain relevant.
Wonderful. So who I have left out? Sanjeev, you said your word?
Yeah, Anand, I think the technology can be used very effectively. The problem is we don't understand or we don't fix the underlying processes, and that's where it has failed. And I've seen it multiple times that where we are trying to bring in technology, the processes are not fixed, they are broken, the information is not coming through. So whatever tool you bring over data, and if you have multiple systems, multiple feeding, unless you first fix it, it will not work. The second thing is we are too eager in finance to work out a ROI for any technology. And that fails. First, we need to understand what is our end user and who is going to benefit it and whether it will work or not. So learn fast, face fast, but I've seen many RPAs, many companies implementing RPAs and failing because they were in a mad race of implementing and chasing the number. It's not a number game. It is just underlying and fixing a process before you even go and fix a simple RPA. That's my take.
Okay. So I hope I have not left out anyone here. It has been going on so well. However, I would like us to request all my fellow panelists to also have a quick look on the Q&A and let's try and pick up at least a few. There are quite a few there. So one question is coming is that one of the challenges to ensure that the technology solutions are kept really simple and easy for user functions. Can we create a platform available to share live cases, examples of successful and effective implementation for others to learn and adopt the best practices? I think this is something that where I can try and give one straight answer is that yes, through this shared services forum, we can create a reservoir of some of the best practices, and if you keep on visiting us and contributing to it, we can really look at that. Okay. Then there is another question is, most of the medium or semi-large companies still are far behind high-level automation. Also, regulatory environment could limit this to some extent. How do present-day finance staff who are in mid-career level can update apart from Power BI or some advanced Excel, etc.? Anybody want to add some wisdom to this question?
Yeah,
I'm
I
happy.
can. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Hari. Go ahead.
So I think the key thing is, I think a lot of people say it's like, I need to become this technology expert, and I need to know the latest tool, and I need to know how it works. Um, and if I consider myself as well, when I was very early in my career, I used to actually think that way. Now it's more, I understand what are the right questions that I'm trying to answer that's going to make a difference to the business. And I think that's where your value really lies. And then leveraging and partnering with the other teams to be able to deliver that value to the business. That's my take on it. Maybe I'll hand it over to you, Geeta.
Thank you, Hari. Good thoughts there. So from actual, experience that we are seeing in our company, so some of our finance staff, have already sort of learned how to, apply, use Tableau and Power BI, and they are generating dashboards. And actually, since they understand also, the analyzing numbers and looking at how to interpret them, they are actually able to add more value. But I think going beyond Power BI and Tableau, those that have that keenness to sort of get into the low code environment where they can learn a bit more, whether it's a little bit of Python programming or other sort of low code software, I think there is an opportunity to drive cross functional sort of clinics or workshops, which we are doing in our company, because the endeavor is to cut across automation and technology to cut across whatever we do, whether it's in the finance, HR, or in the design engineering space in our company. So I think that is working well for us. So mid-sized companies which where finance staff want to learn beyond Power BI and Tableau, I think there could be opportunities of doing some cross skilling. But also nowadays online platforms, there are multiple courses available. I think those also are a good bet to get started on. I myself have done some understanding at my level on blockchain and some of those technologies, and it does help. So that's my take.
Wonderful. That's a very interesting question, and possibly that could be the last one for us given the time. I would request not only one panelist, but maybe more than one to take it up. Is that, can innovation and process discipline coexist? Can innovation and process discipline coexist? Lalita, what would be your take?
I think this is a great question.
Okay, Saj.
Go ahead, Saj. Go ahead first.
Very briefly, I think the way that we've seen this work in AB InBev is to not try to do innovation process discipline in the same team and with the same people. So really create two different teams, one team that is focused on innovation, that is exploring, and that gets a bit of a wild card to do things that people in the operations team would not be able to drive. So I think they can coexist. There will be a lot of tension. There's huge tension between that innovation team and then that operations team. So it all depends on how great those people and the leaders of those departments can collaborate. Because if they do not collaborate, every type of innovation will completely fail. So I think coexist, next to each other, but the leadership alignment is crucial to make it work.
What would you say to that, Lalita?
Absolutely, I agree with Serge. It can definitely coexist, but with probably, because both the things have their own agenda, right? So it has their own specific, unique requirements. While innovation has to be disruptive, the other part is to keep it stable, right? So it can coexist, but I would also say, if you have a good process discipline, it would really help to innovate, because you see things much more clearer, you understand problems better. So I think one can help each other, and certainly can coexist.
And Anand, I can just share, and just couldn't agree more with that. The process can be the base for innovation. And you can automate processes. And we have done that in many processes. So I think it has to be together. Yes, as Sergey said, there could be possible conflicts, because the people who manage processes and the people who do the innovations are typically two different people in the organization. So there has to be a good balance to manage that. But process has to be the base.
Wonderful. And now the last one from my side. On the reporting side, anyone can claim to have embraced a aha kind of a technology on a global reporting area. And this is open to all, please.
I think the technology that impressed us most is what I mentioned earlier in the conversation, is Celonis, is where we can really visually see the business process. I think the UI that they offer on your operation, I think, is incredible. Where in the past we would have to go interview people and try to map the process, and now you can just visually see your P2P process, OTC, whichever process. You see all the inefficiencies, you see all the rework, you have all the statistics and the data right in front of you. So I think this will help us a lot to further standardize and streamline and automate processes.
Anyone else want to take a shot?
Sure. So not necessarily within our own organization, but broadly what we're seeing from our customers is that they are looking at reporting solutions that we have. And where we're seeing the biggest change is they are using traditional data science tools like Alteryx to be able to then look at it into tax processes from a compliance perspective. So it's not necessarily looking at an end-to-end solution. It's like looking at customized solutions throughout the way to then solve the reporting problem. And then being able to overlay that with the regular content updates and the technology that we have to then be able to meet that compliance requirements that they have from a reporting perspective, whether that's from an indirect tax perspective, from a financial reporting perspective, and be able to drive that. So if we go back to our earlier question where right at the start of the panel where we said, less than 10% are moving up this value chain or are still processing on the low cost type of services, where we're seeing again our customers in the GBS space is they're really looking at technology to try and come through into this reporting angle.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We have come up the hour and I think very well discussed topics, a lot of insights, a lot of experiential learnings. And I'm sure we could have continued for a little longer, but there is a discipline that we also have to follow. And thank you very much. Now, I would just like to do some honors of expected of me because this is the day one. We are closing the day one for this Finance Leaders E-Summit. And it has been a fantastic beginning. And we started with a welcome by Rakesh, and then Ravi's keynote address was all said and done highlight of the day with those remarkable insights or creating that boundaryless finance, and also giving those 7 mantras for a finance professional in general, or GBS professional also, it is equally applicable. From there, we went to the first panel session, very ably moderated by Rakesh Sinha, where we got those 4 top-notch CFOs, Rohit, Altaf, Atul, and Sridhar, and everybody talking about the emerging role and how to unlock value and how finance can play that extra bit, and all those fantastic comments that we heard from all of those. And then this panel, which I had the honor of facilitating, but with so much talent available on the same virtual stage, it has been a challenge. It would be a challenge for anyone to be able to do complete justice, to bring out all the nuggets or most of the nuggets of those wisdom here. But we made an attempt, and we have been a very engaging, very fantastic audience. There have been questions, there have been comments, all of those, and there's all been taken note of. So with that note, I wanted to thank everyone once again, and also to mention that tomorrow is going to be another exciting day of this summit. We will have a panelist session, or I'm sorry, practitioners panel, because in Shared Services Forum, we take pride in describing ourselves as by the practitioners and for the practitioners. So that will be a practitioner session in the beginning, followed by some interesting case presentation. And something that I'm personally looking forward to is to experience how a virtual reality kind of thing can be connected with or implemented in the context of financial processes or reporting and all that. And then there will be a little free-flowing chat, fireside chat, that our expert duo of Rakesh and Sanjay are going to take it before we call it closure tomorrow evening. So until then, bye-bye. And once again,
Thank you.
thank
Thanks,
you.
Anand.
Stay safe. Have a great evening ahead.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.